Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our meeting of Cabinet. Today's date is the 6th of May, 2026, and the time is 6 o'clock on the dot. So, welcome to our members of the public and other members in the public gallery, elected members in the public gallery. We've got a reasonable agenda tonight to get through, so we'll play by ear on the timeline and, if necessary, take a short comfort break roughly halfway through. I'll get on with tonight's agenda. In terms of apologies, item number 1, there are none from Cabinet. We're in full attendance. Apologies have been given by Stuart Timmis, the Exec Director from Place. And due to item 7 on tonight's agenda, we're assisted by Fiona Unit, the Assistant Director for Waste and Recycling. I got that right. Just waste. Thank you for your attendance, Fiona. Item number 2, declarations of interest. Do any members or officers present have anything to declare regarding any item on the agenda? No, I'll take silence as declaration. Thank you. Item number 3 is the minutes of the last meeting from the 15th of April. It's only 3 weeks ago. The meeting comments here should relate to accuracy only. Does any member or otherwise have any reason why I shouldn't otherwise sign said minutes, which were published last week? No, I shall sign them. Minutes have been signed. Okay, item number 4, for urgent business, there is none notifiable, so we will move on. Item number 5, I don't have any sufficient announcements to make to the meeting tonight, but I will put on the record that I ask members and members of the public to be aware we are in a pre-election period for the Hackleton Road by-election on May the 7th this week. So please be extremely conscious around what information you impart to the public domain or how it's put across. And if in doubt, we are ably assisted by our monitoring officer on the bench here. I'm sure we'll provide clarity so we don't fall foul of the rules. If everyone's okay with that, thank you. Other than that, we will plod on. And I beg your pardon, I do have an apology for item number 1, Councillor Stratton, which I absolutely am delivering. Oh. And I will be delivering the paper on the youth strategy, item number 8, for him. And we will move on. So item number 6, reports from overview and scrutiny. I have 2 scrutiny chairs. I'm looking at Councillor McCord first. No. Councillor Purser, nothing. Okay. Straight into the substantive agenda. Item number 7, Councillor Stansfield to introduce a report, waste collection and street cleansing services from 2028.
Thank you, Chair. This paper sets out the outcomes of a comprehensive review of the council waste collection and street cleansing services. Waste services are one of the most important, visible and important services we deliver, and it's agreed the recommendations within this report will provide certainty, stability and clear direction well in advance of the contract end dates, which will allow time for implementation and a smooth transition. The council currently operates 3 different delivery models inherited by Vesting Day: a joint venture with Norse in the Daventry area, a contract with Veolia in the Northampton area, and an in-house service which covers obviously the Towcester area and the south. The Norse and Veolia agreements both end in May 2028, which provides an opportunity to fully harmonise services across West Northamptonshire and provide consistency for residents. Officers have carried out a detailed review, supported by independent waste consultants and a working group with cross-party members, representing each geographic area of West Northampton. This has included benchmarking against similar councils, an option appraisal and SWOT analysis, shadow cost modelling, market engagement with the waste industry, and analysts and risk. There are 2 key proposals for this paper. First, from June 2028, the council delivers waste collection and street cleansing services by a direct employed team, otherwise known as in-house delivery. This approach is recommended because it gives the council full control over the highly visible service, provides flexibility to respond to legislative change such as simpler recycling, deposit return scheme and the emissions trading scheme, reduces procurement and market risk, particularly given uncertainty around the Employment Rights Act, increased transparency of costs and supports service stability and workforce engagement. Secondly, the paper proposes harmonisation of waste collection frequencies so that residual waste is collected every 3 weeks by spring 2027 from suitable properties. This aligns the service across the whole of West Northamptonshire, extending the existing successful arrangements in Daventry, which were introduced in 2018. The proposal also enables higher recycling performance and delivers financial savings and environment benefits due to fewer vehicle movements. I want to highlight several important assurances for members. Changes to the residual waste frequency will only be for residents who have their waste collected in a wheeled bin, and there will not be any changes for the residents who currently have their waste collected in sacks or communal bins. Weekly food waste collections are available for all households, which will remove any waste which may cause hygiene or odour issues. There are already existing policies and support larger families, households using nappies or incontinence products, and assisted waste collections for those. These will continue. Evidence from Daventry did show that fly tipping increased when the 3 weekly collections were introduced, and this is proven with other areas of the country. Street cleansing is specially recognised as a priority for this administration. These proposals will allow cleansing resources to be better protected and monitored. The implementation programme is fully costed within the medium-term financial plan, and there will be strong governance through a programme board and delegated authority to maintain momentum. My final comments relate to our existing contractors, Norse and Veolia. I'd like to thank these organisations and their crew who deliver waste services on behalf of West Northamptonshire. The recommendations do not reflect on their services. Their commitment and dedication and hard work is greatly appreciated by all residents and members, and we look forward to continue to work with them over the next 2 years. I would also like to thank the crew in the operatives and the team in the south, who again provide an excellent service. Also, I'd like to thank Assistant Director of Waste, Fiona Una, for stepping in tonight, last minute, and also Vanessa Kelly, who've tied a lot of work have gone into this, and I have full confidence within the team that we'll be able to bring services successfully in-house. In summary, the Cabinet is being asked to approve the move to an in-house waste collection and street cleansing service from June 2028, approve the change to 3 weekly residual waste collections for suitable properties by spring 2027, approve the necessary supporting procurements, including fleet and treatment contracts, and improve the proposed implementation timetable and delegations to enable delivery. These decisions will allow the Council plan ahead for 2028 and ensure residents across West Northamptonshire receive fair, consistent and efficient waste services. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stansfield. So we've got members registered to speak tonight. Councillor Johan's not here, so we'll move forward to Councillor Kilbride. Please take the stand, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors and officers. We want the best for our West Northampton residents. It's as simple as that. Officers have got a job to do. They're trying to find you your savings to make your books balance. As a councillor, and as you are councillors in your wards, you know the difficulties with fly tipping. You know, on the doorstep, the top 2 topics are parking and rubbish. We are blighted by rubbish. Whichever way you try to dress up the figures, you reference Daventry. Northampton is a different kettle of fish. It's very urban. We are overpopulated in a number of streets. We've got lots of high moles, illegal high moles. We've got flats. We've got service flats. We've got roads that should have, say, 100 people in there, and now 50% higher, 60% higher people living. It's the way it's gone over the last few years. That produces more rubbish, and you can see that around all the areas of Northampton. Northampton residents deserve better than going to a 3-weekly. It's not just about the amount of rubbish in the black bin, it's what goes into the bin as well. Hygiene things, nappies, they're going to be there for 3 weeks stinking. We don't want that. We want the best for the residents. You referenced Daventry. Like I said, Northampton is a different kettle of fish. If you go around like I did yesterday, looking at a lot of the public bins, you'll often see accompanied a black bin where someone's just dropped the black bag. It's fly tipping, and this will definitely increase. As the Council for Standards Barn, it's riddled with fly tipping all the time, and this will undoubtedly expand. I know you've got enforcement, but it doesn't. How many penalty notices have you given out over the last couple of years? It's been woeful, and it's set to get even higher and higher. So, like I say, we want the best for West Northampton residents, and to my mind, this doesn't help at all. I referenced the online petition by former councillor James Hill, which is now fast approaching 2,000 residents that have applied. They've lodged their complaint against this, and that's quite significant in a matter of 7 days. So that's all I've got to say, really. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Councillor Kilbride. Next speaker, Councillor Purser.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, thank the Cabinet Member for his presentation and for the officers who've put quite a lot of work. I was involved in the cross-party working group in the previous council, so haven't been involved recently, but in the original kind of principles of what we. And clearly, we've got challenges about reducing the amount of waste we produce as people and increasing our recycling rates, and also keeping our streets clean, which seems to be a huge challenge that we've got. And how do we do this as cost effectively and as efficiently as we can? Clearly, it's a changing world, and we need to be flexible to respond to the changing way that waste is being managed. And so I can see the benefits of bringing the service in-house, because that does give us more direct control. But I think it comes with risks, and I want to ask some questions about those risks, really. I think the first thing is we've got to get our communications right. Many of the people in my ward who are in Terrace Street with black bags think their black bags are going to a 3-week collection. That's not true. But that's the message that has come across because of the way this paper has been presented to Cabinet. So we've got to get our communications right. I think there are questions about ensuring that we've got sufficient management capacity in the organisation, both to manage the service when it comes in-house, but also to manage the transition. I kind of pick up in the last few weeks, I've picked up more reports about lorries breaking down than happened in the last 4 years. Something's going on there, and how we manage the transition of moving from an outside contractor to bring it in needs a lot of thought and it needs capacity to do that. When the leisure services contract was being talked about and the tendering process for that, we were told we didn't have the HR or the financial capacity to manage that service coming in-house. I want to be clear that we do have that HR capacity and our finance capacity to actually manage that and make sure that really works. And that's clearly, that's where things can go wrong, and we need to make sure we get that right. Clearly, we need to invest in our fleet, and there are opportunities in terms of invest to save. I hope this administration will be willing to make the capital investment necessary to do that, because that has got to be, I would thought there are real opportunities to invest to save, spending money now, capital money now, to make the service more efficient in the long run. I see the red light is flashing. And my final point is that so far, we've dealt with taking forward the waste strategy on a cross-party basis. I'd quite like assurance that the current administration is still willing to take it forward, because we've got to take all the people with us. We've got to take all our councillors with us. We've all got a job to do to make sure that this is a success. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Purser. And I can absolutely offer you that assurance of continued cross-party working. It's been the very thing that has helped shape this piece of work. And just to add before we go to the next speaker, that attendance at task and finish groups is always a benefit to help shape what we do, have that input from all around. And the one that was set up on this one, I had the privilege of attending the final session, was geographically balanced as well. So it paid attention to the whole West Northampton area. This isn't a town and the country to one side. This was absolutely everybody. So for the members that did take their time after registering to attend, who actually attended, the benefits there for to be seen has helped gone into the paper we've got before us tonight. So I'll move on. Councillor Hack is not in the room. We'll go to Councillor Ashraf. You're next. I think you've got a microphone by you. Are you not speaking to this? You can give it a go.
I do apologise. I haven't wrote any notes, but this is quite close to my heart. Communities where members of the communities thrive is when it's clean, tidy and welcoming. At the beginning, I did attend many of the meetings, but life is difficult trying to juggle all the different meetings and family and the balance. But I think what we need to really think about is the 3 weekly going to work? Because I spoke to Councillor Stansfield just earlier, and I said those hotspot areas in our ward, Sally and I, we see regularly the very same spot, the very same rubbish, if not more added. So will we see 3 weeks of accumulation of rubbish? And what would that look like? Will they be removed? And would it not been better to have a trial for the 3 weekly? Unfortunately, I wasn't at that last meeting, so I wasn't able to add my views onto this. Whichever way we do go forward, I just want it to work. I just want it to work, because I was born in Northampton. I love Northampton. But every single corner I look at is disgraceful. We should not be living like that. And we need to also put a big emphasis on education. That's so key on education. Many times I'm always informed, oh, we need to go and speak to the young children, but they're not the ones who are dropping the litter or putting the big bin bags out. Their education is being done anyway. And they do work with the wardens, and I go and do litter picks with the schools. But it's the adults. We need to have a good piece of education, even if it means a whole 12 months of education in every single sector, that's including businesses, because we are all at fault, whether it's in the rural areas, suburban areas, it could be in a high rise, it could be anywhere. But if we don't all work together, this will continue And this is not what I had in mind as a future for Northampton. We deserve better. So I hope that moving forward, if the paperwork does get passed today, we put a lot of emphasis on education, because that's going to be something that will really work and hit the nail, and people passing by in the cars, wherever, even on the buses, will see we're actually out in the communities, involve all the councillors, get the officers out, because this piece of work needs to really happen now. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Ashworth. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on the points that Councillor Person made, I think one of the things that sits at this, the whole piece really, is I think there are some issues around communications. And the key points I really want to focus on, though, are, you know, there was, you referred to it yourself, Chair, there was a cross-party working group on this. And the purpose of a cross-party working group is to surely iron out and try and deal with some of these issues before we get to a recommendation phase. And I understand that that's been mixed attendance at those meetings. But the fundamental point about communication sits at the heart of this. And I think we've confused people by using the word harmonisation, because harmonisation may be for the contract or the contract provision, but it is not a harmonisation of service provision. That's clear. In the paper, it still talks about 2 weekly collections for those that are already on that system. And my understanding is there's something like 443 streets in central Northampton that will still sit on that 2 weekly collection. Now, there clearly are concerns, but I think, as I say, that's a communication challenge for us rather than anything else. The provision is very clear. It talks about the opportunity to have additional bins for those people with large families. But we just have to reverse back a bit, I think, and make sure we are absolutely clear on what this does and doesn't look like for people. The Daventry system has been in place since 2018, has been mentioned already. I wasn't a councillor at that time, but I was a resident at that time, and there was quite a lot of anxiety and concern about it at that time. And I have to say it settled very quickly. More importantly, recycling rates went up and less bad waste went into landfill. And those two things for me have to be really good things. So I recognise that there are concerns, but I do think we've got to make sure that if we're having cross-party working groups, they have to work, because something isn't working with them, because we should be ensuring that all of these views are aired at that process. The point I want to finish on is the specific point about procurement of fleet. You probably won't be surprised to hear me mention this. Now, this has cropped up at some point in the past when we had discussions about emissions and various other things. And we talked about alternative fuel options, not necessarily electric, but HVO. Now, diesel has gone up 35% in the last 2 months, and there isn't any sign of that changing anytime soon. So all I'm looking for is absolute assurance that we get the communication right, but I specifically would like to see the detailed costing and business case for what we decide to do from a fleet point of view. We should not let any dogmatic views get in the way. We should look at the numbers. I know that electric vehicles are more expensive. However, if you look at the running costs, they are half, if not less, than a diesel vehicle. So my plea is, please let's do that openly and transparently, and let's look at it from a genuine provision of value for money for our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Aldridge.
Thank you, Chair. It's clear that a significant amount of cross-party work has brought us to this point, and that effort should be recognised. I welcome the clarity and strength of paragraph 5.9, particularly Councillor Stansfield, which sets out the ambition for more consistent and effective waste collection and street cleaning services. However, there remain some serious gaps and areas of concern that cannot be overlooked. The issue of communication with residents has already been highlighted by a number of previous speakers, and the resident-led petition, which attracted nearly 2,000 signatures, has also been highlighted. And there continue to be publicly raised concerns by elected members as well as residents. We do have a challenge around our track record when it comes to communication, consultation, and mistakes on major policy changes. And I just want to pick up the issue around car parking. So my big question, one of my big questions is, what assurances can residents be given that this process will be different? The issue of residents' perceptions around black bags waste, I'm glad has been clarified, because I certainly had a lot of residents extremely concerned about the possibility of black bags not being collected for 3 weeks. So I do welcome the confirmation of the 2 weekly collections, that remains. And in fact, it remains for around 20% of households across West Northamptonshire. And that decision in itself raises questions about the consistency and alignment that underpins this proposal. The final thing that I want to say is that there is a major omission in this report. There is no meaningful reference to educating and working with residents to tackle the persistent problems of littering and fly tipping. And Councillor Ashraf has already raised that. And this applies to both rural and urban communities. Nor is there a clear commitment to strengthening enforcement against those who repeatedly commit environmental offences. So bringing waste and street cleaning services in-house must go hand in hand with a robust plan to address fly tipping and environmental crime.
Councillor Aldridge, can I interject, if I may? The issue of fly tipping is one for regulatory services. Today, we're discussing a paper on waste collection and street cleansing. Just can you stay to the agenda, please?
Yes, I understand that fully, Chair, but it is about impact of that on service delivery, and we are talking about changes to service delivery. So I would like to ask Councillor Stansfield, if these recommendations are approved tonight, how will you ensure that resident engagement, enforcement and education are not afterthoughts, but central to delivery? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Aldridge. Councillor Chauhan, I had you down as the first speaker. I just, as you weren't in the chamber when I gave my announcement at the beginning, I'm just conscious we're in a pre-election period. Councillor Kilbride kindly mentioned a former member of your group, former Councillor Hill, and is speaking about this item in public. Just please do be careful. Councillor Hill's been on the radio this morning. Our member hasn't had the opportunity to reply with his right to reply yet. So very conscious around how we get this right for the public.
I'm Councillor Chauhan and not James Hill, so a completely different person. So I'm not,
just
I don't
cautioning you that
understand.
the name's been mentioned in the chamber by the member behind you, just to stay on topic if we can. Thank you.
Absolutely. So apologies, first of all, I had to collect my cat from the vet, so I ran a little bit late. So the human side of being a councillor got in the way. So I'm going to I've not prepared a speech either, but I am going to speak about some of the conversations that I've had with residents that have elected me. As you know, and you've just mentioned, Chair, there is an election going on, but obviously speaking to residents in my own ward as well. Who have pointed out that, they're not very happy with the proposal of bin collections moving from, 2 to 3 weeks. A number of concerns have been raised. One is the increase in council tax and the kind of perceiving that there's less services with increased council tax. That's number one. Previous speakers have already brought up breaking down of lorries and the impact that's had on particular residents and streets. You mentioned the petition, 1,800 people have signed that petition as well. And also things like geographically, Northampton is very, very different to Daventry. So when we're looking at harmonising services, it feels like we're just bunching the whole of West Northants together, rather than looking at the individual needs of geographical areas, which I think is really important to recognise as well. fly tipping was mentioned. I know you said that's very different, but it could increase fly tipping as well. And the other thing is when we're looking at things like waste collection already, when we're looking at areas such as the recycled areas, residents have been reporting back that they're getting there, then either not getting appointments or it's overflowing. So we need to make sure that this whole system is flowing together. And whether we're talking about waste, fly tipping, or whether we're talking about recycling, it all needs to, work together as well. I'd also like to say that some of the changes that we're talking about are, the contract I think runs till 2028, but we're looking at changes for 2027. So it'd be good to have some understanding around that. I may have missed something there as well. But I think whole in whole, I think it's a really bad idea, changing the waste collections to every 3 weeks. I think it will have a negative impact in Northampton itself. And also there are some discrepancies where we mentioned the black bin collections. Some of them are going to be collected every 2 weeks anyway. So again, there's a bit of a misharmonization. What you just mentioned was what Councillor, Fazana just mentioned as well a minute ago. So I think there is something to be thought of there, but thanks for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Jahan. Councillor McCord, do you have any words of wisdom for us this evening?
Don't know about that. I'll lower the bar. Thank you, Chairman. I think you should address some of the comments that have been made thus far. And I just find it fascinating that those moaning the most come from the parties with the poorest attendance of the working group. And those moaning the most are also those who a couple of months ago were sitting here saying it's not fair we get a free car parking out there. We should do what was doing in Northampton. We're always following the Northampton way. And this is actually saying there is another way, actually the best way, the evidence-led way. So I welcome the report and recognise that members and residents might have concerns. But to each I say, look at the evidence. Fears about vermin and odours and health hazards, fly tipping and much more are valid concerns to raise. But look at our everyday experience in the former Daventry area. And those concerns have not materialised. And if you want a trial, we've had it for the past 8 years. The useful thing about our current setup is that we don't have to guess what might happen. We already have a waste collection and disposal laboratory. The former South Northants delivered in-house directly by the council. The former borough fully outsourced to Veolia, and the former Daventry a hybrid joint venture between the council and an outsourced provider, delivered via a council-owned company. We have contracted disposal and in-house disposal. We have in-house complaints handling and outsourced complaints handling. We don't need to imagine what may be. We can look at the data that we have over many years and reach our own conclusion. Now, I sat on the working group, and that helped shape this recommendation. And while some took the view that all we needed to do was reprocure a new contract, I wanted us to test the options against the evidence. I expected to see a clear financial cost differential in favour of an outsource. The financial models show that whether delivered in-house or via private contract, there is no material difference. It's really a toss of a coin. So that leaves the qualitative factors to assess, and here there were differences. Staff retention, better in the in-house. Absenteeism, better in the in-house. Missed bins, very good all round, but better in the in-house model. Age of fleet, lower average age of fleet with the in-house model. Number of complaints, again, low all round, but the lowest within the in-house model. That is the evidence. Those are the facts. On that basis, I support the recommendation. I said time and again in the working group, it's been mentioned again, this is primarily a communications exercise and not a logistics one. We need to improve our communications, starting with members and then working out to residents. And this is one area where I think merits a lot of discussion. The move to the 3 weekly black bin collection is scheduled for June next year, 27, but the in-house service doesn't start until the year after that in June 28. We also have a plan to review routing, collection days, potentially moving collections possibly from Tuesday through Friday and not collecting on a Monday. All of that may be right, But can I ask that we have a plan fully worked up before we make any of those changes? I see little point in moving people to 3 weekly collections and then asking them to change their collection day as well, possibly a year later. If we can't implement it in one big bang, we can at least tell them, this year we're going to 3 weekly, next year you'll move from Monday to Thursday or whatever the new day would be. That clarity will help with the communications that are vital to the success of this. And just one point. This is our universal service. It is well regarded, has high levels of satisfaction. It is not broken and doesn't need fixing. Changes are required, but tinker at this at your peril. We must get it right. Now, these changes happen 11 months before the next scheduled elections of this council, and residents will remember if you get it wrong. And finally, I say to members, if you want to look at this, call it in for review by overview and scrutiny, if that's what you wish to do. As chair of the committee, I want to be clear, while the evidence has led me to support that recommendation, I'll support the scrutiny with the same open mind and objective set of decisions if somebody can turn up alternative evidence. In other words, I'm predisposed, but I'm not predetermined. A formal review, if members wish to go down that road, will let you test the assumptions, see the evidence, see the risks, and come to your own view. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor McCord. I think Councillor Stanton's got all that written down. Con, yeah. Should we just go to Cabinet first? Anyone on the Cabinet got anything to add? I'll add a little bit of testimony to Daventry before I hand back. Councillor Slope.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got nothing prepared, but one thing that was probably absent is the fact that and I've probably mentioned this before, the inherited debt that we have was pretty massive, and we've been dealing with that. And in addition to the other savings that we've seen from moving it from 2 to 3 collections is a saving of approximately, well, just under £1 million a year, and that is not insignificant. It also puts less stress on the vehicles, which I'm sure I'm stealing some of Nigel's answers, but it was just that point that saving is quite significant, Chair, and I thought it was worth bringing to everyone's attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Slope. Anybody else? Councillor Hasty.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say, working on the working group with Cross Party, I never realised quite how complex the whole process was. Then you realise that West Northants collects 21 million bins a year, so it is there's a lot of pressure on looking at bringing in-house, not bringing in-house. Certainly, I've had the experience of the questions one asks about bringing staff in-house through the MPH transformation. One thing I would say that Councillor McBride about enforcement over the last couple of years, I'd just like to remind him we've only been here 1 year as administration, so enforcement is a problem that's throughout administrations. How do we enforce, or how do we educate? I'm not sure how much more education we could probably give people, because as a kid, excuse me, as a kid, I remember, keep Britain tidy. So, there were other advertising slogans which I won't use here. But it was the idea of, we've had education about rubbish. Surely everyone knows you shouldn't throw your litter out. I don't know how we educate. I do know how you can enforce, and I would feel I think we'd have cross-party support about how do we enforce miscreants, especially miscreants who are repeat offenders over and over again, whether that be just routine fly tipping on a small scale, or all the way up to the large scale. I'm not going to go into fly tipping on that, but enforcement of littering is, I think, really the only way we educate. And the other thing I would just like to say is that I did a lot of talking about in my ward, so Weedon, Woodford Horse, which is obviously a very spread out rural ward, and the overriding, as I echo Councillor McCord's, they've had it for 8 years. They were quite surprised, if not a little bit miffed, to find out some other people in West Northants were getting theirs collected every 2 weeks. But what they did say is that they were absolutely fine with it. In fact, 2 people actually suggested they could go to 4, and I kept that one away from Stansfield at the moment. But so basically, the trial has worked. It is a huge piece of work for us to bring in. I'm very confident we can do it with the officers we've got. But it is a question of a challenge, but that's a challenge we recognise, and we're going to keep very close tabs on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, councillor Hastie.
Yeah,
Councillor Stansfield.
Thank you, Councillor Hastie and Councillor Slope for your encouraging words. And yes, so Councillor Kilbride, yeah, the questions, fly tipping and enforcement, yeah. We all know, I've spoken quite openly in this room about enforcement or lack of, and myself, Councillor Last, I've been working very hard with the relevant officers to get more enforcement and proper enforcement. And we've had some positive meetings very recently, and we are assured that there's going to be a change of policy within the council, and we are returning to handing out more enforcement, having better enforcement, and there'll be a lot more FPNs being given. And also with that, we'll advertise that, and hopefully that'll help reduce some of the fly tipping. The more people we find, the more we'll advertise, and hopefully the people get the message out there. Hygiene products, obviously, as you may know, if you go on the council website and click, you can tell. Obviously, if you've got more than two babies in nappies, you can always have another bin. Yeah. Obviously, if you double bag your waste, double bag your nappies or your dog mess or whatever, obviously that's going to help reduce the smell. We do realise, obviously, you can get a smell during the summer with dog mess and obviously nappies. And obviously hygiene products as well. If you do have a family member you're caring for who's got into continence pads or obviously continence sheets or whatever, again, you're entitled to another bin. Yeah. We are looking. We just had a quick chat about. We are going to look at have discussions about obviously some families who might need extra waste capacity. We're going to look into that. Yeah. So yeah, we are aware about fly tipping, and we are on the case. I assure you. It's one of my key things I think about most days of the week. Okay, and as long as Councillor Lass as well. Councillor Purser, thank you for your comments. Street cleansing. We know this is a key part of when we went round the room and we asked the vast meeting. Councillor Arnold was there about street. One of the key things is street cleansing. I think we can't comment about. We've had amazing bin services, yeah. Waste collection for the last how many years? Yeah. Obviously, we have a few issues at the moment. I'll go into that in a minute. But we've had great collection services, massive, I think 98% is it? Yeah, absolutely. You can't beat that really. But where I think we have been let down as residents and people living in Northampton, certain areas in Northampton do not receive any street cleansing. And it's shown. I think the previous administrator, for some reason, decided to concentrate just on that town centre. Fair enough, keeping it nice. But we do need, some parts of Northampton need a bit of care. And I hope with this, bring your services in-house, we have more flexibility. And also, we are going to ring-fence the street cleansing team. At the moment, the street cleansing team is taken off their duties to go to be an operative on a waste vehicle because there might be shortages due to sickness or whatever, or holidays. So that is something we're really keen on, to make the street cleansing where we can't take the staff away from what they're doing and they're on their fixed duties every day. So hopefully that will improve. And again, I'm very happy with cross-party communication. I think it's really, I'm happy to cross-party briefings during this process over the next 2 years. However form that takes, I'm really happy. I think it affects everybody in West Northamptonshire. And obviously, I want that to carry on. And if you want to be part of that, just let me know, and we'll try and sort out what sort of committee or whatever we're going to have. So please let us go. Comms exercise, well, yeah, council, it's just a massive comms exercise, yeah. Communication exercise, yeah. People want to know when we do bring free weekly in. People want to know when they need to put their bin bag out, their bin out, not the wheel bin, not their bin bag. And obviously, people did get confused maybe by the statement. Well, obviously, black bag. Oh, I'm going free weekly in a black bag. I can assure you, we will not be going free weekly with black bin bags, yeah, or communal waste bins. That will not happen. Yeah. Breakdowns at the moment, yeah. We are suffering a number of breakdowns at the moment. We had a bit of a spell a few weeks ago, and we've had a spell for the last couple of days. Unfortunately, the fleet is aging. So for some reason, whoever did the contract with Veolia and Norse in 2000, whatever it was, 8 years ago, decided to have a 10-year contract, but the bin lorries only last 8 years. So that ain't going to work. And obviously now we're suffering from that process, yeah. So At the moment, yeah, we have maintenance issues. Obviously, it's like a car. The older it gets, the more maintenance it takes. More when they come up for MLTs. Obviously, also at the moment, they bought the vehicles all at the same time, and obviously the MLTs are due at the same time. So again, if you're an older car, it takes a lot more maintenance to get it through the MLT, or it might fail on more things. So again, it's just a combination of things that are happening at the moment. And obviously, we are having the odd breakdown due to other issues. I was concerned. I've met some senior Veolia management. They are bringing in extra resources. They've got staff on overtime. They're looking at how we're going to carry on for the next 2 years. So we are going to keep a very close eye on that, yeah. Fleet investment, yeah, I totally agree. We should hopefully have a fleet. And also, we don't want to do exactly what they did 8 years ago and buy all the vehicles at the same time and all break down at the same time. All the MLTs that are due at the same time. It's just not. So we're going to have a mixture. I think we're going to have a mixture of buying and leasing. Is that correct? Or look at the possibilities of buying and leasing. So we don't get that. So that's what's happening in the south. So they've got a rolling process of buying vehicles. So they don't have the issue of breakdowns and what we're getting at the moment. Yeah, and like I say, very happy to carry on with the cross-party briefings. I'm a very open guy and I'm happy to carry on with that. Councillor Ashraf, 3 weekly back bags. Yeah, obviously there was some people read a little bit of the statement and don't read all of it. So they just think, back bags 3 week, we don't, obviously that's not going to happen. Yeah, I do assure you. Trial, yeah, obviously we've had a long trial. It's gone on since 2018. Yeah. Councillor Kilbride, I missed your questions. I'll come back to you 1 minute. Sorry about that. I missed a bit of your question. What I would say, it covers some of Councillor Kilbride saying that, and obviously in the you've got the petition going on at the moment. It mentioned about urban areas. Yeah, obviously I've done quite a bit of research. What councils are brought in the moment. I think there's 40 plus councils at the moment have gone to 3 weekly. With I think another 4 or 5 this year going to 3 weekly. So it's a rolling process. And then obviously, you can tell my accent. I'm from a lovely place called Bury in North Manchester. So yeah, I'm very happy to say that Bury for a long time now have had 3 weekly bin collections. Oldham, again, very. My family lived there, and Rochdale. Now Oldham, they've had it for 10 years. So if it can happen in a place like Oldham, Rochdale, and Bury, again, very mixed cultural. People from all around the world, mixed properties. Mixed everything, a lot of it's totally very similar to some parts of Northampton where we have issues. If they can do it, we can do it. And it goes with, education, enforcement. It's all one program. Yeah. Councillor Harris, yeah. Also, there's going to be a lot of road shows. We're going to have some road shows, especially in problem areas. I'm happy to, if you suggest an area where we can have a road show. We're going to have lots of road show. We'll be there. Obviously, we've got some issues in Talavera, so we're going to have some road shows within Western Favourable Shopping Centre on Fridays and Saturdays, stuff like that, to speak to residents. And I think some residents just forget how to recycle. They just forgot, or the message hasn't got through, and perhaps we need to get that message through in a different way. So yeah, education, sandwiches, like say, like signage in different languages, leaflets in different languages. We're going to look at everything. Council services, harmonisation. You said 2 weekly. It's actually it's one. The black bags is every week. It's not 2 weekly, so they'll be staying on a weekly service. Yeah, yeah. But it says it definitely says weekly, doesn't it? Definitely, it's 100% says weekly, unless I've read it wrong 3 times. I'll check it in a minute. I've got it here with me. Yeah. But what every property within West Northamptonshire, whatever sort of property that is, should have the same service. Yeah. We all pay the same council tax. Yeah. Or different banding. Yeah. Now, obviously, you've said that you pay more tax and you get less services. Well, ever since I've lived here, 35 years, I've paid more tax and got less services. And I think, as we all know, that will continue until we get different funding models. While we're funded as where we are, obviously that will continue, and hopefully in 2029 that will change drastically. Street cleansing, Councillor Aldridge. Obviously, it's a big thing. Thank you for that. It's a really passion of mine, passion of yours, passion of Councillor Ashraf as well. I started this because I want to make Northampton cleaner. my children and my grandchildren, and hopefully we will. It's not a golden egg. We're not going to, it's not going to be paid for gold. Everyone's going to be sparked in, but we hope to have it better. We hope to bring the standards of the south up to the rest of the whole of West Northamptonshire, if possible. Yeah. Workshops, yeah, great. If you want to be involved, that'd be really good. Thank you. Fly tipping, like I've said, we've had some meetings. We have some positive meetings. I've been banging my head against a brick wall for a while. We've had some positive meetings. We think we're now on the right. I don't think we feel that positive, and hopefully we'll be seeing some improvements very shortly. Procurement of fleet. I'll just pass that on to my lovely assistant. Obviously, who knows more about that, and she can go run through that with you. Yeah.
Yeah, we will be looking at fleet procurement as part of the implementation programme. As Councillor Stansfield has said, we currently have a mixed age fleet in the south area, and that works very well in terms of reliability, and we have a rolling replacement programme. So we are looking at how we can move to that type of model for the Northampton and Daventry areas. And I think alternate fuel options was also mentioned. We will, of course, look at that, but we'll also need to consider the cost implications. So we'll look at all different fuels.
Yep. So I'll just go back to Councillor Shahinda. Yeah, increasing taxes. Well, yeah, and they're getting their services. Like I've just said, I think every council across the country will be doing exactly the same, and have carried on done it for the last 35 years since I've lived here. And I imagine it'll carry on for quite a while. Hopefully in 2029. That will change. We'll see. Bin Lloyd breakdown. Obviously, I've just described what's happening at the moment. We have got issue. We're monitoring it daily. We're in communication with Veolia and Norse daily, and they're both looking at what we can do to make it a more going back to what we were. We had a great service. Unfortunately, there's a little glitches at the moment. Hopefully, we're going to bring some new vehicles in, high-end vehicles, and then hopefully we'll get back to how we were before. Do we have any changes? I don't know that. I can't remember. Sorry, I can't read the last bit. Was that something else I missed? Anything I missed? Was there anything I missed? All right, thank you. Of course, last but not least, Councillor McCord. Well, thank you for your lovely words of can and support. It was really great for Councillor McCord. Obviously, he was a regular tender at the folk working group, and his knowledge from the south was, it's brilliant. And obviously, he was very advocacy for how great the south were at their service. So I really do thank him for his straight talking, and what he said within the group, and we all took it on board, and obviously it gave us another perspective. So yeah, I thank him for that. And yeah, a very good point. Yeah, obviously, well, we have had a big trial. We couldn't have had a longer trial than 2018 till now, could we not? We've had an 8-year trial. It's worked. It's proved to work. It's working around the country. 40 plus, it's going to be more and more every year. More and more councils will go to this, and we're just the next one in line. So we will be going to it by spring 2027. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stansfield. We ticked all my list off at the same time, but key bits that takes from this. Fleets. I was reading an article the other day, which I know you shared with me, in fact. Wakefield Council been trialling electric refuse collection vehicles 4 years ago to become a carbon neutral authority. They binned them, forgive the pun, failure, and they've reverted back to looking at diesel trucks. But of course, as a outward looking authority, we will consider all options when we go to fleet procurement. But other fuels are available, and anaerobic biodigesters that make biofuels and things like that should be considered, maybe are in scope for modification to any new vehicles we can get. So that's something we can absolutely look at. But again, what we've pledged in our policy is to make meaningful and the correct choices for our authorities, and to not rip off our residents and see them out of pocket. Communication, this authority in the last year has made absolute strides in putting points to note in front of the public and engaging with our residents like they haven't been before. They certainly weren't for the previous 4 years, to the level they have been in the last 1 year. So there's some serious points to note about that. And we continue to do so actively through our members. And it takes that member engagement in the democratic process, turning up being the key rule of politics. The second one, doing what you say you're going to do. And That's what we need to do more of. So education is key, but it also begins at home. And all of us as a society have a responsibility to educate people at home in common sense, more so than blaming a council. As I pointed out on council tax, I was surprised the opposition had the audacity to raise that. They say that we get less, but the three parties also voted for maximum council tax increases when we did not here in West Northants as Reform UK. So not quite sure what the logic is with that, but we'll leave that for another day. But what are the key learnings from this? One of the key learnings from this process for the Cabinet, and I'm quite happy to put this on the public record, is about governance and project governance. We've heard reference to a 10-year contract with vehicles that have an 8-year shelf life that are now not so roadworthy, needing repair and ongoing maintenance. And members will also get the missed collections emails that come through daily when they come in. I was gobsmacked to see one for Kingsthorpe the other day, which was a particularly large number. So we know that's something. But the Cabinet, if anything, coming into administration a year ago and getting to grips with things, have learnt a lot through the annual cycle of a council on how things work. You know, everyone admits that new councillors, new people from the community stepping forward for the absolute right reasons. That's highlighted things that we stood for office for, to look at things differently, to pick up process. Sorry, Councillor
Chair,
Harris, this
if
is
you
actually
lecture us on pre-election periods, frankly, you should abide by the same rules. I defer to the monitoring officer to interject. I still have not had an answer on the black collections, black bags, 2 weekly or once weekly. I was told it's status quo, which is 2 weekly. So can I have an answer for that, please? And please spare us the lecture. With respect, you gave us a lecture at the beginning. We should all abide by the same rule.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. I'll row back on that, if I may. I'll just come to the point about project governance, and I'll conclude with that. The point about project governance and looking at things, members standing for office, was to look at things differently, look at process and participate in organisational change and culture change in how we look at how decisions are made, how people in Cabinet can apply their operational and managerial expertise from the world of work into the decisions we take forward. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
I'll just find the sentence and I'll come back to you. Thank you. At the break.
And just revert to Fiona, Unit 4, clarity on the 2 weekly, 1 weekly collections.
The intention is that houses who have a sack collection or communal bin collection will continue on weekly collections. They are currently on weekly collections and there will be no change.
Okay. If there's no other points to add, we'll take that to a vote with a proposer from the floor. Councillor Slope, seconded Councillor Hasty, and a vote with a show of hands, please. And that's carried unanimously. Okay, item number 8 on tonight's agenda is the West Northants Youth Strategy 26 to 30. And Councillor Stratton is absent, but I will introduce the report and ably assisted by Melanie Barnett, who will be able to add some points of clarity around that. So Councillor Stratton has given us quite a detailed note on this, and I will do my very best to deliver that for you. The strategy that we've put forward tonight in the paper sets out how the council support young people aged 11 to 19 and up to 25 for those with SEND or care experience. It responds directly to what young people have told us about their lives, their challenges and the support they need to thrive. The strategy is being co-produced with young people and partners across education, health, voluntary and community sectors. Youth ambassadors and our youth council played a key and central role throughout, ensuring the priorities reflect lived experience and local need. Members should note that consultation highlighted several consistent themes: rising emotional well-being and mental health needs, access to services, difficulties navigating support. Young people also told us they want safer spaces, clearer information, and a stronger voice for decision-making. The strategy sets out a clear vision to support all young people in West Northants to achieve their full potential through co-production, inclusion, and a positive transition into adulthood. There are 6 priorities for delivery over the next 4 years. These are as follows: aligning the youth offer with the 0 to 19 model, integrating youth services into family health and family hub approach, improving awareness and accessibility, strengthening online safety and digital resilience, improving coordination and impact monitoring, and refreshing the local youth offer on an annual co-produced basis. The strategy aligns with the One West Northants plan, the family help strategy, the send and alternative provision strategy, our corporate parenting strategy, and our wider commitments around prevention, family help, community safety, and reducing inequality in the community. Delivery will be overseen by the Youth Offer Partnership Board, chaired by the Director of Children's Services, with clear reporting lines for existing partnership and health and wellbeing governance. I therefore commend the paper for youth strategy to Cabinet and invite questions. And I have 2 speakers down. I think Councillor Carley is absent. I'll go first to Councillor Baker and then to Councillor Keeble.
Thank you, Chairman. We now have a number of really good strategies that cover all of our youth and children's services. This youth strategy is one of them. I'm very pleased to see this paper come forward after a considerable amount of work over a long period of time. It is a very good, inspirational plan. There are various actions outlined in the report, but now we need a really good plan on how these actions are going to come to pass. There's a great deal that relies on other organisations. So first of all, do we have details of how we will encourage others to actually work together, which has been a challenge in the past? Will we have consultations regularly with the voluntary sector to let them know and understand fully the role that we wish them to play? The word there is voluntary sector, so we do need to help them, inform them, and support them adequately because they are voluntary, as I've said. All levels, young people must be consulted, and how is this going to be achieved? Many of our local charities, for example, rely on us to do on grants from us to do their work. So my last point here, because I don't wish to do electioneering and talk for hours, will there be any funding given to support the success of this really good strategy? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Councillor Keeble.
Thank you very much, Chair. I also very much welcome the fact there's a youth strategy, and it's great that that young people were involved in preparing it, and I hope that they will be really very much involved in taking it forward, because that will be crucial. There are 3 points I want to bring up, however, which I think perhaps need a bit more consideration. It's governance, the focus on disadvantage, and issues around finance. On the governance issue, it is a very complex governance structure which is set up. And I'm just very conscious that there's 2 papers tonight which are proposing complex governance structures involving a lot of chief officer time. And actually, it's the same people sitting around probably the same tables talking about different issues. And I do wonder if those governance structures are going to be unwieldy, and if the sort of trickle-down approach means that there's going to be a diversion of attention by the time it gets to the grassroots. And I would urge you to look at the number of these complex governance structures that you've got in all kinds of areas, because there's also the community safety and health ones when you're looking at direct service provision. On the disadvantage issue, this is really not adequate. It's absolutely right that a youth strategy should look at issues other than disadvantage, because there have to be things in it for other kids in other areas. And I think the feedback from the young people shows the complex issues that affect young people today and what they want from the council. However, if you're going to look at disadvantage, then you have to provide the services where those communities are. And you've said you're going to shape them around the family hubs. And in Northampton, we simply don't have the family hubs in the places where they're needed. Now, I know there's one being produced in the library. I've been there to see it. I've been up to one of the ones in Malton as well. And they are not, I mean, I don't think the one in Northampton's actually operating properly yet completely from what I can see. But those are not going to deal with the complex issues around the disadvantaged young people. For example, in our ward, Ruffies and mine, where we have some of the worst of the knife crime, we don't have a family hub, and the one youth centre is now that we have is now being displaced because of what's happened about the Darlington Spencer Centre. So I'm sorry, I see the red lights doing, but I've said the 3 points. It is really important that those services are provided where they're needed. You know, Kings Heath, Briar Hill, St James, Spencer Estate, Kingsley, Semelong as well. All of those areas where there's really complex need, and we know there's problems about county lines and challenges. And the finance area. Now, we proposed in our budget 50,000 to start up this strategy with the aim, and I understood from the officers that you could access other funding sources elsewhere. Everyone round the table, you all voted that down. You can't do this for nothing. And that's what you're saying in one of your paragraphs. You've put, my screen's gone blank, but you've said it'll be done in the budget round, and you've just had a budget round and you voted against it. You can't do this for free. You've got to allocate money. Okay, those 3 points, but I will want to see this being rolled out, and I want to see it in my patch as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Keeble, I'll come to your points. I'll deal with it all at the end if I may, but
Yeah,
all
sure,
noted.
sure.
Apologies to Councillor Aldridge and Harris. Neither of you on my briefing note, I've checked, you are registered to speak. Councillor Aldridge first.
Thank you, Chair. I really welcome this youth strategy and the genuine effort to involve young people in shaping it. That engagement matters, and it's right that the strategy has a sense of ownership by the young people themselves. It was also appropriate that the strategy was considered by the Education and Children's Overview and Scrutiny Committee from the beginning, and I really welcome that as well. There is much to support in the strategy, the focus on tackling inequality, directing resources to where need is greatest, and working in partnership with schools, health services, and the voluntary sector. That's exactly the right approach. But we must be clear, this strategy must work for every young person, including those in our rural communities who too often feel overlooked, and those in the more deprived urban neighbourhoods where provision is ad hoc and inconsistent. The findings from the Young People's Survey should give us pause and concern. 35% reporting anxiety or mental health challenges, and 24% identifying themselves as neurodivergent. If these figures reflect the reality across our 55,000 young people in West Northamptonshire, then we are facing a scale of need and that demands more than warm words. It demands decisive, resourced action. And that brings me to my very big concern. I have significant concerns that the overall strategy could end up as no more than a set of laudable commitments and aspirations. And as Councillor Keeble has said, there is no defined budget and no visible allocation of budgets within the medium-term financial plan. We've heard much about ambitions such as the youth zone, yet this is absent from this strategy. Without clear funding, timelines and accountability, even the best intentions will not translate into real change. So my question to, would have been the cabinet member, but to yourself, Chair, is that how will you ensure that this strategy is not just aspirational, but deliverable? What concrete steps will you take to guarantee that young people in West Northamptonshire see meaningful improvements rather than this becoming another well-written document that fails to make a tangible difference? Our young people do not need another strategy on a shelf. They need action, investment, and outcomes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Aldridge. Councillor Harris?
Chair, it was just Councillor Aldridge on the list.
Oh, I beg your
actually.
pardon. Your name's been written on my.
That's right. No,
Okay,
it's
no
just-
problem.
thank
Thank you. Melanie, would you like to go first? I've
Shall
got a
I
few notes I think I can
start?
answer.
Yeah, so if I start with Councillor Baker, and what I would like to say is thank you to all scrutiny members as well for being part of. Sorry,
Is it not picking up?
is that better? Better?
Yep.
Yeah.
There you go.
First of all, I'd like to thank all scrutiny members that were part of this, and I think what hasn't been mentioned this evening but was in the paper, that there was a joint scrutiny session with members and young people, and that really set the tone for the strategy. Just to give some reassurances, absolutely, as Councillor Baker raised, this isn't just a strategy that we've done with young people and that's it, we're not going to engage with them again. And I hope that you would have seen that through the family help strategy as well. What we are looking to do, and we've already got the chair of the Youth Council, she will be co-chairing the Youth Offer Board once a term. So it's very much a case that we're developing the delivery plan and young people will sit on our board to make sure that we do deliver what we're saying we're going to deliver. What I would say as well is that as Councillor Aldridge said, it is aspirational and it absolutely should be aspirational. We should be aspiring to do the very best for our children and young people, and this is what this strategy does. I do agree that sometimes you can have strategies that sit on a shelf, but again, I would draw members' attention back to the family help strategy. And last week at scrutiny, we had a really good, productive session giving updates on the family help strategy, and many members in this room commended all of the officers in terms of the work that they've been achieving through the family help strategy. And I do not see this as being any different. We do have, as mentioned in the strategy, we have the Youth Council, our Young Northants, who are very much part of it, and young ambassadors, and they will continue to inform. And we've also given a commitment to young people to feed back to them. Tomorrow, we've got our first session of pulling together the delivery plan, because I absolutely do agree a strategy is only as good as how you deliver it. So the delivery plan, we've got a draft that we've pulled together, and we will be meeting with partners tomorrow to go through that. And just to give an idea of partners, we do have police there, we do have health, we have police and fire and crime commissioner, we have the Children's Trust, we have education, we have school reps, we have voluntary sector reps. So it's very much a board that is very, very proactive. I do agree with Councillor Keeble's point in terms of governance, and we did discuss this at the Youth Offer Board about whether we bring all of it together in terms of youth and family help. But it was felt by some members and by officers and partners that that wouldn't be a good way to start this off. We need to make sure that it's two very distinct pieces of work to ensure that we do deliver. Absolutely agree that we have to focus on disadvantage. I hope I can give some reassurance that we do have data relating to vulnerability within Northamptonshire. We are aware of where those postcodes are, and that will be an area of focus for us in terms of delivery. But equally, I do also agree that we have to make sure the offer is for all young people. So there is a balance to be struck between that. And I think that's all of the questions that I can answer. And we're working very closely with the National Association of Youth Clubs as well. And I did mention this at scrutiny, they've done a fantastic piece of work looking at youth clubs across Northamptonshire, including North Northamptonshire, and they've identified 120 that they didn't know existed. So I think there is very much an element of we need to make sure that we're communicating out to young people in terms of what is available in the local areas. I'm going to hand back to you, Leader, to answer the question about budget.
I will act with care and be delicate around this. I think you've probably answered quite amply the other things. And I'm pleased that this was a paper, I believe, we took to a full council in June. I'm pleased that, although it's taken some time to be back here today discussing that we've been able to work around the room to do that. So with pleasure and support. The question on finance is absolutely a key one. There could never be enough money on the magic money tree to sort out what we've got to deal with outside these windows. I think that's something we can all agree on. The council's medium-term financial plan will be aligned around this, and any future transformational investment required in to deliver this youth strategy will be part of the annual budgeting process going forward. That's something we'll be looking at, and that process for members and the public probably starts around August, September time. But it's already in sight that we need to do this. So I'm very, very happy with what I've seen so far and what I've heard. I'm very happy we will be in a place where we can start delivering on this in the autumn. Has anyone from the Cabinet got any questions that you've not already spoke to? Councillor Harris, sorry, Councillor Coos.
Thank you, Chair. Not a question, but I'd like to just support the paper. I strongly support the youth strategy. What stands out is that this has been built with young people, not written about them. It clearly covers young people aged 11 to 19, care experienced young people, and those up to 25 with SEND, the groups where early support makes the biggest long-term difference. From an adult social care and public health perspective, I welcome the focus on prevention, emotional well-being, digital safety, readiness for adulthood, and practical pathways into independence, including housing support. These are exactly the pressure points where systems fail if we wait too long. The alignment with family help, the SEND strategy, and the NHS 0 to 19 model, particularly the blended school nurse and the youth worker approach, gives us a real opportunity to intervene earlier and more effectively. This strategy sets a clear direction and a strong partnership framework. If we deliver it with the same integrity it's been designed with, it will reduce escalation, reduce inequality, and genuinely improve the outcomes for young people. I fully support its adoption. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coos. Kind words. I'm sure many people in the room agree. If there's no other points from Cabinet, we'll take that to a vote. Proposer from the floor, Councillor Manning, seconded Councillor Stansfield, and a vote with a show of hands. Thank you. That's all members. Okay, item number 9 on tonight's agenda, the Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence Strategy 26 to 30. Councillor Hastie, you're to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair, councillors, officers, members of the public. I do apologise about that, Chair. I was just dealing with a situation. I've copied you in that's not related to this paper, but that was why I was a bit distracted. But anyway, this Cabinet briefing for Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence Strategy for 2026 to 2030. The purpose of this report is to seek Cabinet approval for the North and West North Hampshire Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence DASV strategy for 26-30. This strategy sets out a shared 4-year partnership-led approach to preventing domestic abuse and sexual violence, protecting victims and survivors, and holding perpetrators to account. The strategy fulfills statutory duties under the Domestic Abuse Act of 2021. It supports the delivery of serious violence duty and aligns with the national commitments to reduce violence against women and girls, and is VORG. So why this strategy matters. Domestic abuse and sexual violence remain among the most widespread, harmful and underreported crimes affecting our communities. Thousands of residents across Northamptonshire experience abuse each year, with significant impact on victims, children, families, health services, housing and community safety. The strategy is underpinned by comprehensive local needs assessments, lived experience, insight from victims and survivors, and learning from the frontline practitioners and domestic homicide reviews. Its ambition is very clear. It is to ensure abuse is neither tolerated nor hidden, victims are believed and supported, and those who cause harm are consistently challenged. So, the strategic approach. The strategy adopts a prevention-led, trauma-informed and whole-system approach, recognising that domestic abuse and sexual violence are not isolated incidents, but they're patterns of harm rooted in power, control and inequality. It reflects a strong focus on early intervention, particularly with children and young people, inclusive support for all victims, including men, disabled victims, LGBTQ+ communities and minoritised groups, improved trust and confidence in statutory services, and a clear commitment to perpetrator accountability and behaviour change. It has 5 strategic objectives. The strategy is structured around 5 shared objectives. 1, the early intervention and prevention. This is tackling harmful attitudes, educating children and young people about healthy relationships, and identifying abuse earlier across health, education, and social care. 2, support and protection for all victims and survivors, strengthening trauma-informed, accessible services, including safe accommodation, advocacy, therapeutic support, and support for children. Number 3, trust and confidence in services, This is absolutely vital. Improving victim experience, embedding trauma-informed practice, and ensuring victims feel believed, respected, and protected when they seek help. And I think throughout the country and over the past few years, this has steadily increased. This idea that the taboo and the stigma of this is being erased. It's more accepted to come forward, but it's absolutely vital that people, when they come forward, are protected and put in an environment where they can tell their side of the story and they're not going to feel they're not believed. 4, a coordinated community response, quite simply strengthening partnership working so victims experience a joined up system with clearer pathways, improved MARAC performance and better access across rural and urban areas. And 5, holding perpetrators to account, improving evidence-led prosecutions, civil prosecutions, and access to accredited behavioural change programmes while prioritising victim safety. Governance and assurance, the strategy will be overseen by the joint North and West Northamptonshire DASV Strategic Board, a board that I also sit on with all agencies. So I coming back to you, your comments, Councillor Keeble, it's very simple, it's very clean, and it's very thorough across all agencies. Would you agree? Yeah. I have to say it's an eye-opening experience for me to be on that and to learn, and it's something that now drives me forward in terms of really trying to get a better understanding of what people go through, especially where it's coercive domestic abuse that's not so visible to the outside world. And I was with Councillor Aldridge at a women's empowerment meeting with other councillors as well from across the parties, and the 2 most harrowing stories were of stalking and coercive behaviour that, I mean, quite frankly, was chilling in terms of how it progressed from being a normal relationship to being absolutely a nightmarish relationship. So we're learning, and I think the whole process is one about learning. Sorry, I'm going on a bit there. The delivery will be supported by detailed action plans, clear performance measures, and annual monitoring. And a midpoint review in 2028 will assess impact, respond to emerging evidence, and ensure continued alignment with lived experience. And the key message for Cabinet: this strategy represents a strong evidence-led and trauma-informed commitment to tackling domestic abuse and sexual violence across West Northamptonshire, delivered through partnership prevention and accountability. Approval enables partners to move forward with confidence, clarity, and shared responsibility while ensuring our statutory duties are met and victims' voices remain at the centre of our response. It went through widespread questioning on scrutiny. I think it went through, that was very welcome extra scrutiny. And I did receive, Councillor Keeble, the Labour West Northants Beyond Words, Ending the Violence. Unfortunately, I only got this at 4 o'clock this afternoon. However, there's an awful lot of good work being put into this, and I will take it away and read it. It's as you know, I'm always happy to take ideas from across the chamber. Anyway, listen, I've said enough. I would welcome your support presenting this this paper to Cabinet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hastie. So on this one, before we go to members, there's a registered speaker from the public. I think it's in the public gallery. Hannah Martin from the Women's Empowerment Group. Ms. Martin, you have 3 minutes on the timer, if you would, and you can speak by pressing the button on your microphone. Thank you. Big one in the middle. Should work. Has it gone down? There you go. You've got it.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. So I wanted to start by acknowledging the ambition of this strategy. The vision is really strong and the commitment to partnership working and survivor voice is clear. However, there are some critical questions and realities that must be addressed if this is to lead to meaningful change from a personal perspective as a survivor myself. Firstly, how will this success be truly measured? While there are performance indicators outlined, we must ensure these go beyond, they go beyond numbers. Increased reporting does not always mean reduced harm. Success must be measured by whether victims feel safer, whether they trust services and whether lives are genuinely improving. Secondly, how will this be funded? This strategy is ambitious, but without clear, sustained investment, it risks becoming aspirational rather than transformational. We cannot deliver systemic change on short-term or uncertain funding streams. Thirdly, and this is a real critical issue, there is a real and growing lack of faith in services, particularly in the police. Many victims do not report abuse because they do not believe they will be protected, or worse, they fear the process itself. This strategy must directly confront the reality rebuilding trust is not optional, it is essential. In my personal and advocacy experience, I also see a significant gap in trauma-informed therapeutic support. Survivors are often left waiting or without access to the long-term therapy they need to truly recover. Crisis support alone is not enough. Healing from abuse is a long journey and services must reflect that. We also must invest far more prevention in teaching healthy relationships, consent, and emotional awareness from an early age. It's incredibly important. A study suggests that children from the age of 3 start to mirror relationship patterns. If we want long-term change, it starts with children and young people. Finally, I want to speak honestly about perpetrators themselves. While behaviour change programmes have a role, we must be realistic. From frontline experience, there is often a high expectation placed on change, but the reality is far more complex. Too often, responsibility still falls on victims to stay safe, rather than on systems to effectively manage and contain those causing harm, and we need to rebalance this. Greater investment in prevention and survivor support will have a far more lasting impact. And in closing, this strategy is a step forward, but its success will depend on honesty, adequate funding, and a willingness to truly listen to lived experiences. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. I'm sure you can see from the round of applause you received how that was received. Thank you. I have a number of members down to speak. Councillor Lister, you're first.
Thank you, Chair. Good strategy, good step forward, and it builds on a previous review. So we've got 17,500 recorded incidents in our county last year, 41.6% mental health needs. Very ambitious in our objectives as to what we're trying to achieve. But how does that fit around the finances of what this is trying to do? So we've got 50% increase in disclosures, 75% increase in early identification, but we're not adding additional any resources or financials within this, and they will all be met within existing partner budgets. How are we going to identify these more victims with no resource implication? Or are we going to be asking the voluntary sector to do this? So 50% more work there with no extra funding. And what happens when and if these voluntary sectors hit the breaking point because of the extra work we're asking for them to do? Obviously, children are now legally recognised as victims as well, so we're committing to 100% needs assessment rate correctly. But given the significant pressures we already see within children's services, who's going to carry these assessments out with no additional funding? But also we look at, we're going to commission a new buy and fall service for minority communities, that's minority and rural areas. How will that be funded also without cutting the resources from other high-risk areas? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lister. Councillor Keeble.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I very much welcome the contribution that was made by the public speaker. This is a really important strategy, and it's important it's taken forward. That's why the Labour Group did some particular work on it. And if it didn't come to you earlier, it's just because if we'd have known there was an earlier timetable, then we could have met it. But I do hope that you will take that on board. In particular, the recommendation about the community sounding board, which is really important to make sure that all those communities which deal with the more complex cases and complex issues can be heard properly. I've got 4 particular points I just want to make quickly: finance, demographics, provision, and governance. The governance one is the same one I made previously about don't duplicate and have top-heavy structures, and have some intermediate targets that the sounding board can help to monitor or can be instrumental in monitoring. On the finance, that is really critical. And that brings me on to the provision as well, because it's not just a question of putting money in. The provision has been cut. Now, that might not have been your fault, but it has been cut, in particular around the Sunflower Centre, which was an absolute sort of centre of real good practice, and also around the number of refuge spaces. I know there's different views about refuges, but they are an important provision, and we need to make sure that they're built up. Now, I mean, I appreciate the fact that this is a joint strategy, but there are very major differences between the demographics between West and North, which is really interesting. In West Northants, we have double the number of referrals, 5 times the number of referrals of people with disabilities, 6 times the number of LGBT referrals, and 4 times the number of people with mental health problems. Now, those are very significant, that's what it says in your report. Those are very significant differences in the profile of what you're dealing with. And whilst I understand that you need to look at provision across the board, it is really important that we identify who we're having to deal with, because this is West Northants Council, and how we're going to meet those particular challenges of those particular communities. There's one further thing which I think Hannah raised, which is absolutely core to how you deal with domestic violence, and having dealt with it for a long time. And that's it. You've got to believe the women, right? You've got to believe them when they say that they have experienced abuse or violence. And you've got here issues about housing allocations policy. It's also in a further paper, and I'll deal with it more fully then. When women come and say that they have been abused, they have been the victims of domestic violence, you have to believe them, and you have to deal with the housing consequences of that, which are tough. But if you don't, then those women can be repeatedly abused and suffer repeated violence, and so can their families. And as we've heard, the shaping of children's approaches towards relationships and domestic arrangements starts very early. So I do think it's really key that you look at the read across for the whole range of council services, and you start with believing a woman if she comes and she says she's been abused or she's experienced violence at home. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keeble. Councillor Ashraf.
Thank you, Chair. I want to begin by welcoming this strategy and thank the officers. It is a strong and ambitious, aligned with the duties set out in the Domestic Abuse Act and reflective of the wider priorities within the Violence Against Women and Girls. However, the question we must ask tonight is simple. Is it deliverable, and how will we know if it has been delivered? If this strategy is to succeed, it must be underpinned by strong and ongoing scrutiny. This means clear measurable outcomes, not just activity, but impact, regular performance reporting to members, transparent data that shows whether victims are actually experiencing better support, and crucially, the ability for this council to challenge where delivery is not happening at the pace required. Scrutiny is not about criticism. It's about ensuring we deliver on what we are promising to some of the most vulnerable people in our communities. Alongside that, I want to emphasize 3 key areas that will determine whether this strategy will truly make a difference. First, early prevention. We must start engagement through education in schools, raising awareness and equipping people with the understanding of healthy relationships from a young age. Second, training and workforce readiness. All frontline staff, not just specialists, must be confident in recognizing and responding to domestic abuse. Missed opportunities early on can have devastating consequences later. And thirdly, community engagement and trust, particularly with policing. This strategy will only work if it is rooted in our communities. For many victims, trust in the police and statutory services has been eroded. If people do not feel safe to come forward, then we are failing at the very first step. Trust is not built through strategies, it's built through visible, consistent engagement. That means officers and partners being present in communities, listening, building relationships, and working alongside grassroots organisations, faith groups, and local leaders who already hold that trust. And in context, I just want to make a point. How often do our officers and partners go out into the communities to engage with domestic, to speak to residents on domestic abuse support and awareness? And how often should we be going out and talking about this issue? I want to firstly just mention that I want to thank Melanie. She came to the community centre to see how the centre would serve the community in Darlington Spencer. And I'm actually pleased that she actually saw what we saw in that community, the potential. And it's that potential you cannot see sat behind the desk. I would also like to put on record that Councillor Keeble and I welcome the officers to visit our ward, because without that visible presence, it becomes very difficult to rebuild confidence and ensure victims feel safe to seek help. And finally, this must be a whole system effort. The council cannot deliver this alone. Strong, accountable partnership across housing, health, police, and the voluntary sector are crucial. And yes, I truly support this strategy, but I urge the Cabinet to ensure it is matched with robust scrutiny, clear accountability, measurable outcomes, a strong focus on prevention, and genuinely sustained community engagement. We need to protect the victims and hold perpetrators to account. And I would also like to welcome the opportunity to work alongside the officers at the early stages, if possible, to share my years of experience, understanding of the communities that I've worked with for over 20 years, and that trust has been built for that consistent reason. I just want to lastly just mention, domestic abuse is a very difficult subject. I was recently approached by an individual who wanted to find out why I was talking about domestic abuse and why I was bringing the subject into the community. And my response to the individual was, I treat everyone equally. And if he is worried about what my husband may be thinking about my voice, he doesn't have to worry, because 33 years on, I must be doing something right. I had to share with him who I was. I don't need permission from anyone. I'm not going to be silenced, and I'm definitely not afraid to stand up for justice, inequality, and fair society. Finally, I wanted to leave him with the confidence that if he ever had any difficulties, I am pleased that if he wanted to contact me at any time and receive a non-judgmental support, he's welcome to, and I handed over my card. And I think that message was more powerful than him starting off the conversation to try and shut me up. I believe if we stand up for what is right and not be silenced, we can go really further, and it needs to be a collective voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ashraf. Councillor Ware, I have you down to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, thank you to Hannah for taking the time to address us this evening. I appreciate your time and coming here. We welcome the work done on this strategy and are pleased to see it specifically recognises the heightened barriers that those with protected characteristics and uncertain immigration status face. I appreciate and amplify Councillor Ashraf's comments that she made at the Scrutiny Committee on the 23rd of April, and I support her recommendations. I have questions for the Cabinet Member for Housing and Communities as follows. I note the KPIs are tabled for 2030 and a multi-year action plan is mentioned. At scrutiny, the officer made reference to a 3-year action plan with a midterm review, as did Councillor Hasty in his presentation this evening. Whenever we're waiting for an action plan, we have the possibility of deadline creep. So my first question is specifically, when will the action plan be issued in draft or any other form? Where is the funding plan for this strategy? We need these things to ensure appropriate scrutiny. The officer mentioned at scrutiny that this strategy has already been through scrutiny in the North and that suggestions and recommendations and additions or changes were going to be collated and then update the strategy accordingly. Where have we got to with this collation and amendment process, please? It was mentioned at scrutiny that it is recognised the opportunity for recognising domestic violence through various other agencies and contact points, although the officer pointed out there is much more to do in this area. So what are we doing to embed the ask and act, the process of targeted inquiry already introduced in other parts of the UK to identify violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence into our Make Every Contact Count approach, including debt services and housing services? What plans do we have to provide training for members in this approach to ensure that we're all well placed to support their ask and act approach? The report says there are no financial or resource issues. However, if we are to implement this strategy, then resources and funding will be required. What contribution is WNC making? The report mentions partner budgets, but what are they? Figures for last year show that WNC contributed £155,000, but figures from the PFCC suggest that this is short of what was actually required. In related matters, I understand that the council leader has confirmed that he will be signing the Northamptonshire Women's Charter on behalf of this council. When will he be signing that charter, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. To Cabinet first for questions to Councillor Hasty, if any. I think Councillor Cousy have something. We'll come back to those points from the members afterwards.
Thank you, Chair. I strongly welcome and support this domestic abuse and sexual violence strategy. This is absolutely central to what we do in adult social care and public health. The domestic abuse and sexual violence are not just crimes. They are major drivers of poor mental health, physical illness, safeguarding risk, homelessness, and long-term demand on social care services. If we wait until crisis point, we've already failed people. What I particularly welcome here is a clear shift towards prevention and early identification, especially the commitment to routine inquiry in health and social care settings. This is exactly how we stop harm from being hidden and compounded over years. This strategy also properly recognises children as victims in their own right, and that matters. We know the impact of trauma does not end at childhood. It shapes adult health, behaviour, and the life chances if we don't intervene early. I also support the strong focus on inclusion, recognising disabled adults, older victims, and marginalised communities who often wait the longest for help or are simply missed altogether. Finally, I welcome the firm emphasis on holding perpetrators accountable and shifting responsibility away from the victims. That is essential if we want to break the cycles of harm rather than manage their consequences. This strategy gives us a joined-up, evidence-led framework across health, social care, housing, education, and community safety. I fully supported the adoption. Thank you.
Thank you, beg your pardon. Thank you, Councillor Coos. Anyone from the floor before we go back to Councillor Hasty? Councillor Hasty.
Wow. Firstly, I'm going to start with a most sincere apology to Hannah. You must think I am very shallow, not very observant, and rather dim for not welcoming you here tonight as much as you welcomed me into your meeting. I could only say that sometimes you come to these meetings with lots of numbers and figures and worries in your head. So 1,000 apologies. And thank you very much for allowing me to come to your meeting. It was inspirational. So I apologise. I think I'm going to try and put this into clumps, if you like, because there's a lot of repeats, the common themes coming through this. I will I will need Jane to help me on some of these things. I will try and give you answers from my perspective and from honestly, and anything that we miss out. If I do miss something out, please hold me to account and make sure I get back to you, because this is fundamentally one of the most important pieces of work I think I do in my communities and housing role. It's very, I won't go into it, but it's very, actually, I know more about it personally than I would want to share here. But anyway, so I'm going to look at funding as a group amongst all councillors and Hannah's comments about funding, because basically, although the spirit may be willing, if the purse is empty, wallet's empty, whatever you want to call it, we can only do so much, and talk is cheap, and we do need funding, and we will come back to that later. Firstly, Hannah, going beyond the numbers, I totally agree with you. Statistics don't show the true pain of this crime and the suffering. As again alluding to, I won't mention names, the two young ladies who gave their stories. Yeah, absolutely, life-shattering. But the good thing was that your group there has demonstrated how people can turn the corner and free themselves out of a vicious trap. And it was, I wouldn't say it was a feel-good story, but it was a feel-good ending. And I guess that's what we're looking for in a lot of these things. Lack of faith. Seen this in the case when with police, from experience with being in the Met Police, lack of faith. I don't know. I have no immediate answers for it. It's something we have to work with all services. We've seen this with, for instance, with the Northamptonshire Guardians, where they have a different type of relationship with the public than the police do. That type of fostering of that relationship is to be encouraged. That's not to say I think the police are often in a very difficult position. But how do we overcome this lack of trust in police? And also, Councillor Keeble, it is fundamentally essential that that women are listened to, of what age, but also men and also minoritized groups have to be listened to. So we shouldn't just pigeonhole this into sort of. It is essential that people listen to. The teaching healthy relationships, again, it's in no way to undermine the importance of this. Of course, it's essential, and it comes back to the core of housing, community, family, all the sort of precepts that the concepts that we all hold dear, and it all has to be kind of almost reintroduced into this country, because we seem to have lost our way about the idea of healthy relationships. And whether that be through social media or pornography or all sorts of things that we're not going to cover here tonight, there is a degradation of that understanding about what a true, normal, healthy relationship is and a nuclear family. And that's an education process that's probably way above my mental capacity, but one I would embrace to have it brought in. Victims to stay safe. I think that's absolutely essential, but I think one of the key things I've learned is the fact that victims often become re-victimized by the moving them into a safe place. They're moved out of their normal home, they're moved into a temporary accommodation, the children and all the situations with that. By getting them into a safe place, you're actually victimizing them even more. And we are working, trying to how you resolve that situation, because I think that also prevents people from wanting to come forward. What's going to happen if I report this? And that fear leads to people being reticent to come forward. And as we knew from your meeting, I remember the young lady saying that when it was literally, she had that window, it was a window of opportunity. The perpetrator was not there, bang, it was an opportunity, and it was literally a fight or flight, but this time it was a flight. How do we encourage people to look for that window of opportunity? The trauma informed therapeutic processes, that's something I welcome to learn about. I know nothing about it. I will be more than happy to go into that. I think I've spoken for quite a long time, most of it probably waffle. I do apologise. I'm going to pass it over to one of my more eloquent advisors. But I would say to all of you here, I am listening to what everyone has said. And we are, as administration, but we are as a council, very aware of the fact of just how serious an issue this is, and we will do our utmost across party, I'm sure, to try and resolve it. Sorry, Chair. I wasn't trying to win the sweepstake, I promise you.
Thank you, Councillor Hasty. We'll defer to Jane Carr for some input.
Thank you. So I'm just going to run over some of the questions and hopefully I'll have answered most of them. If there's anything I haven't picked up, please feel free to contact me. So with regards to funding that has been raised a number of times in this, clearly we have ongoing grant funding that is available to us at the normal rate, but we also currently have a reserve that is available, so a substantial reserve of £1 million that we have to invest in some of those interventions that we have in addition. So we do have some money available. One of the things we're looking at next, as discussed, is the action plan. So the action plan is due to be available in draft form by the end of July. Clearly, we are trying to involve our partners and get input into that. So hopefully it won't slip, but that's what we're aiming for. We did take the version with the North comments back to scrutiny, and we received the input and that was shared. So that's been back through and round, but we've also agreed that the action plan will come into scrutiny as well, along with 12-month updates. We can, of course, take it back in on a more regular basis if you need to. Part of that action plan will be to ensure that we have measures that are not just about reporting, that are much more about outcomes for individuals. And one of our intentions as part of that action plan and also the resetting of the housing target operating model will be to build in outcomes to those that make it part of our pathway. So at the moment, we have services that address domestic abuse and sexual violence. We have interventions, but we need to fully embed that in our pathways to really make that, bring the outcomes that we want from that. So thank you, Hannah. Just to, as I'm an officer, I like facts, as you will know. So just to put something factually correct on the record, sunflower funding has not been cut. In fact, we invested a further 45k in this financial year in those services. So we have, in fact, increased funding to Sunflower Centre. So just to correct that. Sorry, so healthy relationships has been mentioned a number of times. We have a lot of early education and schools work, but it is one of the outcomes that we're trying to achieve and do more around education on healthy relationships. Again, we'd welcome input from partners on some of those actions that can take place. Just going through all of the questions, sorry. With perpetrators, again, it's one of our outcomes and the priorities or the objectives under the priorities that we need to meet. We're very clear, particularly in terms of housing, that we often move the victim and actually we want to do more to make sure that people remain in their own housing and actually we can support in that way. So there'll be a lot of work going on in that housing pathway on that. Just looking to see any more. With regards to ask or act, we don't actively do it, although we do use some of the principles within that, but we will take it away and look at what that guidance says and if there's anything more that we can add to what we're doing. We do use making every contact count as a fundamental approach, and the domestic homicide reviews that we do leave us with a lot of kind of recommendations and questions that we need to ask. So we build into our process whenever we get a recommendation through those as well about asking the right questions at the right time. But there's continuous training that goes on underneath that with all of our services. Sorry, just making sure I've got everything. Sorry, and trauma-informed support, absolutely. We need to look at earlier support in that. So we already have it built into our contracts, and the domestic abuse and sexual violence contract that's just being procured at the moment has that built in. But we do need to look at how do we provide that earlier support. And there are gaps once the commissioning is complete. And signing the charter, absolutely the intention is to sign it. We've been concentrating on the strategy for now, but then we need to review the charter and go from there as our next piece of work. I think that's picked up everything.
Thank you, Jane. Charlie, I've just got a point to add, if I may, before you sum up. That's okay. Councillor Keeble.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask about the Sunflower Centre because there've been communications with the PFCC about the funding for the Sunflower Centre and the fact that it is short of funding, and that the funding that was agreed by West Northants ended up being less than had been requested. Now, I mean, I've seen some of the other figures as well. But can we just get to the bottom of what the funding is for the Sunflower Centre? Be absolutely clear, because that project was an absolute exemplar of good practice nationally. Absolutely iconic at the time it was set up. And it has had its ups and downs. I'm not necessarily blaming this administration this year, but I am saying that certainly over the past 2 years, it has experienced some reduction in funding. And my understanding was, and this was from the PFCC, that the funding agreed for this year was less than what had been requested, which is why I raised it. But perhaps we can settle that outside of the meeting. Thank you.
That's fine. And there's a difference in the wording. The wording used was cut. I said it hasn't been cut, but it is less than they requested because they requested a lot more than previous years. So we can bottom that out outside, but there are a number of things that are within that need a conversation, but it's certainly not been cut.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Councillor Keeble. I just wanted to, before Councillor Hasty sums up, confirm that our intention to sign up to the Charter. Before we did so, we wanted to ensure that additional important pieces of work had been carried out on the multi-agency strategic approach to tackling the issues across Northants. I'll be pleased to be signing that in due course. I'm aware that Councillor Martin Griffiths of Northants Council has already done so. We had another piece of work, as you see, going on in the background, but I'm very happy to confirm that we will do that as part of our ongoing commitment. Councillor Hasty.
Thank you, Chair. Just to sum up, this is a very positive start. It's a very meaningful start, but it's just the start, and we need to keep pushing. And I welcome support from the Cabinet to start that journey. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, if we have no other input to that, and being on the time, can we have a proposer for the floor? Councillor Last, first out the blocks there. Councillor Manning to second, and a vote with a show of hands, please. Cool, thank you very much. At this point, we'll just take a very short break. It will be no more than 10 minutes if we can, just for a comfort break. Okay, members, ladies and gentlemen, the live stream has concluded. We're actually 20:07 to restart the meeting. And we then come to item number 10 on tonight's agenda, which is the approval of the proposed process for the completion and submission of the local SEND report plan. In the absence of Councillor Stratton, I will introduce the report to myself. And I'm ably assisted again by Melanie Barnett, our Director of Children's Services. So there's a number of speakers recorded to speak, and I've added Councillor Purser to that list. Polite request received earlier, which I'm happy to accept. So tonight's report to Cabinet seeks the approval to delegate authority to the Director of Children's Service in consultation with the Section 151 officer, the leader, myself, to approve and submit the local SEND reform plan and accompanying local partnership maturity matrix by the 19th of June, in line with the Department for Education and NHS England's local partnership maturity assessment guidance. It was issued in March 2026. On the 9th of March 26, the Secretary of State for Education wrote to all local areas, setting out the requirement to develop and submit a local SEND reform plan by the 19th of June. I'm sure members shortly in question will note that that's a particularly short period of time. So firstly, to commend our officers in turning this around very quickly and making sure we have something to submit in a couple of weeks' time. The plan is underpinned by the completion of a local partnership maturity assessment, new teeth, which must be co-produced with partners. In advance of the statutory deadline, a final draft of both documents must be submitted to the Council's DfE advisor by the 15th of May. Delegated authority is therefore requested to ensure the timely approval and submission within these nationally prescribed timescales. All local authorities with a SEND deficit will be eligible in 26-27 to receive High Needs Stability Grant, covering 90% of their high needs related dedicated schools grant deficit accrued up to the end of 25-26, subject to the approval of a local SEND reform plan. Grant payments will commence from autumn 26 for these locally approved areas in the first assessment round. At this stage, national arrangements for funding the remaining 10% of the SEND deficit have not been confirmed. I'm sure Councillor Slope and Martin Henry will be able to confirm our current running deficit on that. I believe it's in the region between 65 and 67 million pounds. And members will note from other representation in Chamber that we forecast that by the point the government would sort of take over as being £200 million in total accrual, which is a significant amount of money. And as we just said, SEND deficit of the 10%, how we finance that yet to be confirmed. That will be a significant amount of money, even at 10%, if we're in the region of 200 million. So I will take some questions from members that have registered to speak, and with Mel's assistance, if I may, Mel, give you some answers and if not, some points to refer back to you later on. And the first speaker is Councillor Baker.
Thank you. I'm very supportive of the paper that our officers have put together, and as you will be aware, I've worked for many years in this particular area, so know it exceedingly well, so therefore won't spend too much time going over small details. But the paper does have a good understanding of our current needs, which shows that our officers actually are the people that are doing the right job. But we all want our best, the best that we can for children. And the rise in children coming forward with special educational needs is huge. And I know it's escalating all the time and has done seriously over previous years. Early help, we all agree, is the way forward for the future, but does not address in any way the present and increasing needs of SEND children we have now, and the huge concerns that we know that parents have on the lack of their ability to be able to get a good education for their children. And this is something which is exceedingly stressful and worrying for our families who feel that they don't have the right school for their children and seemingly have no way forward, and they need all our support in that. We acknowledge that we don't have enough provision in county, and there are planned ways to address this. I'm concerned really not about any of the things that are in the hands of our officers, because I do rate them as very capable, and over the years we've put some really good people in place in order to work on all of our SEND plans that we've had over the previous years. But the concern is, as you just said, Chairman, about the funding, our DSG is overspent at this stage to an enormous amount, and it will be rising. And there seems to be various hoops to go through to get funding from this DFE plan, with no clear clarity on how that will happen. I know that there's a stop on the 25-26 funding but our DSG will be overspending all of the time, and we're now coming towards 2027. It's still rising, I'm sure, even though it's been capped then, we will still be overspending. So the white paper is mentioned several times, and I have been in the position of having a previous white paper that never came to any legislation at all, but we all ran around making all sorts of plans about a white paper that didn't actually come to pass. So this will probably be 3 years in the making before it gets to legislation. So I think if our Director of Children's Services is able to speak to our Department of Education support lead and ask them if there's any clearer funding, any clarity on how this funding will happen for this high needs funding that we're all entitled to get if our plan is approved. Because at the moment, I think, I'm sure Martin will agree, it's a very tenuous thing as far as I can see, that we'll do all this and we will not get any money.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Councillor Ashcroft is down to speak. Councillor's not here now. Councillor Harris. And we'll take Councillor Purser at the end if that's...
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Aldridge is going to pick up the main specific content related to the document, the proposals itself. You've already alluded to the main issue that concerns me, which is what happens to that 10% balance, which in its current format is somewhere north of £6 billion. And as you say, if the time runs on, it's going to be much, much bigger than that. So I guess my key question is, I understand that there may or may not be some manoeuvring there from government. We don't know what that looks like at all. So what's the risk mitigation that we are putting in place as a council for that scenario? And I think we should be thinking about worst case scenario just in case, because we don't know what that looks like. I say that especially given that we have, to balance the books for this year, had to tap into a contingency reserve pot for the first time to balance the books. You know, those reserves are not going to be there forever and a day if we're facing this type of funding. So that's my key question, is what are we doing about worst case scenario planning, because it could be quite severe for the council. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. I echo those points completely. Councillor Aldridge.
Thank you, Chair. This is not just another report. It's about creating a high stakes plan that will determine whether we secure approval for the 90% relief on the cumulative GSG overspent. And, you know, it's around 60 million. It'll certainly be more than that, I suspect, over the next little while. And, you know, DFE and national bodies do tend to set very tight timelines, which means that across the country, I know that councils are running around and working at fast pace to develop robust, transparent plans to meet the DFE requirements. And who's to know what happens to them once they go into the big pot at the centre. But I've got an issue around ensuring proper democratic oversight of something so significant. Elected members, particularly through Children and Education Overview and Scrutiny Committee, have neither been informed nor meaningfully engaged. Instead, we're presented with a cabinet paper at this sort of 11th hour. And I understand the tight timelines, but one of the key areas within the framework and within the 7 core pillars of the plan is effective system leadership and governance. Yet the very process we're following appears to fall short of that standard. The assessment guidelines were issued on the 9th of March. There was a scrutiny committee meeting on the 28th of April. Why at no point did the chair of the scrutiny committee or the cabinet lead ensure that the committee was informed or had an opportunity to make a contribution to this fairly significant development? Once again, this raises serious questions about the role of overview and scrutiny committees. These committees exist to monitor cabinet decisions, inform future policy, and ensure accountability. Why then, when they are bypassed, we weaken the very foundations of local democracy? So let me be clear, this is not about questioning the capability or professionalism of our officers. And I know Melanie Barnett reasonably well, and I am full of admiration of the amazing work she does. It is about process, it is about transparency, and it is about ensuring that decisions of this magnitude are shaped through proper democratic engagement. If we're serious about strong governance, then we must start by getting our own house in order. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Aldridge. Councillor Purser. You got a mic there now.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, this is a very important issue that faces us, and I just wanted to pick up the fact that the government is grasping this issue and has done an immense amount of work in the time it's been in office to make sure we get the approach right. And clearly there are major challenges across the board, and it's really important that we keep a partnership approach going, that there is a proper partnership between parents, schools and local education authorities. And this is all part of this process. Recognise that this is a very tight timeline, and recognise that we've made an important progress in the last 18 months or so in this authority, in this area of service. But it is an area that was previously neglected by the previous government and kicked into the long grass, which is why we've got such a huge problem at the moment. So I look forward to seeing the report that we send into the department. Clearly there are huge challenges for us all, both at national and local level, but we have to work on this and get it right.
Thank you, Councillor Purser. Is any comments from Cabinet before I defer to Melanie and myself if I need to?
Okay, thank you, Chair. My first comments will be really quick. Councillor Baker, I agree with everything you've just said. So I think you're absolutely spot on in what you've said. And I think Councillor Harris, very similar. The uncertainty around this is key. The timescales, in my view, are completely unreasonable. And I think if we think about the time we've had to do this, we've also had a 2-week Easter break. So actually trying to engage with schools, clearly we had 2 weeks that we lost. The other thing that I would add is that although the paperwork came out originally, we then got updated version of the maturity matrix. So we started to look at it and then we had to change our approach because the paperwork was changed. In terms of scrutiny, I'll be really honest with you, there wouldn't have been anything to bring to scrutiny because we are literally still writing it as we speak. So we've taken off a number of officers that are focusing on this. We are still having workshops. And just to give some reassurance, I think Councillor Purser, you mentioned in terms of parents, we have our parent carer forum that are part of that. We have health colleagues, we have social care colleagues, we have adult social care colleagues, we have schools. And I think just in terms of governance, again, to give some reassurance, this will be going to our Send Alternative Provision Board, which is chaired by our independent chair. So we have got governance in terms of that sign-off. And unfortunately, because of the timescales, we were not able to bring it to scrutiny, and there wouldn't have been anything to bring. The other thing, just to add, is I don't know what this looks like going forward. And the reason I don't know what it looks like going forward is because we haven't been told. We do have our DFE advisor. She is part of those working groups. So she is guiding us as we go along. But in terms of what happens with the deficit in the next 3 years, we have not been given any information about that, despite me asking several times. And I would say that isn't just a local issue, that's a national issue. And the Association of Directors of Children's Services have all collectively raised their concerns with the department about the uncertainty and the risks to councils in terms of the finances. And on that note, I'm going to pass to Martin to talk about the deficit, if that's okay. Thank you,
Thank
Chair.
you, Melanie. To Martin on finance.
Thank you, Chair. I think Melanie covered most of the points, actually. There is still uncertainty. So if we're still closing the accounts for 25-26, that'll determine the total cumulative balance that we've got sat in the balance sheet. We think it will be in the region of £65 million, as quoted by Councillor Arnold. 90% of that, if they pass the plan, would come to 58.5 million, leaving us that balance of about 6.5 million. In terms of how that balance is funded, we just don't know yet. The comments that have been made so far have been along the lines of local authorities will be supported to fund that 10%, but we don't know what that level of support is. So we're just waiting for that clarity. I think the second point is for the next 2 years, because we've got 2 years more worth of DSG deficits or high needs block deficits, which will come forward in 26-27 and 27-28. Again, the line has been that they will work with local authorities to support them in terms of funding those deficits, but the detail just isn't there. I think going back to Councillor Harris's point, the plan B, if we had to fall back on our own resources, if there wasn't adequate support that we could pick up for that £6.5 million difference, it would have to come out of balances. We hold risk reserves, as we know, and it'd be another call on our one-off reserves.
Thank you, Martin. And that adequately sums that up. And members in the chamber know you've got no firmer advocate than me to challenge this where necessary, as I have done previously by writing to government, and I'm happy to do so again. Any members from the floor have anything else to add? Mel, would you like to come back in?
Sorry, Chair, if I can just add, one of the things I didn't talk about in terms of contingencies, we continue to develop our resource bases, so that is part of what our plans are going forward. But I think it's also important for members to know that we are seeing increased requests for education, health and care plans, and clearly that's because of the fear for some parents in terms of the uncertainty that lies ahead. So we're facing this with increasing demand as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Mel. Okay, if we're all done on that one, I'll take a proposer from the floor. Councillor Coos, seconded Councillor Stansfield. Vote with a show of hands, please. And that has passed unanimously. Thank you. We're on to item number 11 of tonight's agenda, the review of the housing allocations policy, and to Councillor Hasty to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. This is the review of allocations policy dated 24th of March 2026, bringing the executive summary to Cabinet. So this report provides an update on proposed changes to the housing allocations policy for West Northamptonshire. The review aims to ensure legal compliance, align with statutory guidance, and respond to increasing housing demand. The revised policy prioritises households in greatest need while maintaining fairness, transparency, and consistency. The adjustments to local connection criteria, employment eligibility, and income thresholds, the introduction of Band B succession and revised banding for homeless applicants, the enhanced provisions for vulnerable groups, including care leavers, domestic abuse survivors, and applicants with disabilities, and the implementation of auto bidding and improved offer processes. 6-week public consultation was launched on the 12th of January 2026 and ended on the 22nd of February. Yes, 22nd of February. So the background to this is local authorities are legally required under Part 6 of the Housing Act 1996 as amended to maintain an allocations policy. West Northamptonshire introduced its current scheme on the 1st of April 2024, consolidating 3 legacy policies. Since implementation, 13,449 applications have been received as of the 18th of March 2026. That's a 79% increase over 24 months, with 2,306 live applications currently on the register. Demand for social and affordable housing continues to exceed supply, creating pressure on resources and applicant expectations. So the legal and regulatory context, to put this into some context, the proposed policy complies with the Housing Act 1996, Localism Act 2011, Equality Act 2010, the Domestic Abuse Act 2021, the Armed Forces Act 2021, Homelessness Reduction Act of 2017, and any other relevant legislation. It also meets the regulator of social housing tenancy standard requiring fair, transparent, and accountable allocation processes. So the summary of the changes: the succession of tenancy to introduce Band B succession for successors requiring alternative accommodation direct match if unsuccessful after 6 months. The local connection, change in residency requirement to 3 years out of the last 5 years. The employment eligibility, which removes the 90-minute commute clause, requires proof of permanent employment 16+ hours a week for 6 of the last 12 months. And immediate family connection. Close family must have lived in WNC for a minimum of 5 years continuously. The supported move on, this is initially placed applicants in Band B, and this, but it's moved to Band A after 12 weeks if no direct offer. And when it comes to homeless applicants, only those owed a main duty placed in Band A, prevention and relief duty applicants placed in Band B or C based on priority need. Living with family dependents, remove Band C clause requiring homeless approach after 12 months without success, move to Band B. Vulnerable applicants, rough sleepers who decline homeless approach placed in Band C, add criteria for verified sofa surfers. B and D exclude applicants who deliberately worsen housing situation for 12 months before reapplication. Offers and auto bidding allows up to 5 bids per cycle, which is introduced auto bid for bands A and C, A through C, where statutory duty owed, direct offers for Band B, and succession of MAPRA cases. Shortlisting and offers, all offers provisional pending pre-tenancy checks, domestic abuse survivors offered properties at least 5 miles from risk area. Award of higher band, applicants meeting 2 distinct criteria within same band will be awarded next higher band. And the income thresholds, single £40,000, single parent £50,000, and couples at £60,000. And the assessment period increases from 33 to 42 calendar days. The housing debt, maximum £1,000 debt allowed with 12-week repayment plan, and the applicants with enhanced PIP, applicants over 45 with enhanced PIP eligible for older persons accommodation. So what is the impact and rationale of all that? This reduces Band A pressure by reassigning applicants appropriately, aligns with best practice and neighbouring and it aligns with neighbouring authorities. It improves fairness, transparency, and operational efficiency, supports vulnerable residents, and ensures effective use of housing stock. And as of the 18th of March of this year, the impact of the adoption of the revised policy will affect the following numbers. Is that still right? As of that date. So as of this date, these numbers are correct, not as of today. Yeah. So as of the 18th of March, 2026. Homeless applicants, only those owed a main duty placed in Band A, prevention and relief duty applicants placed in Band B or C, based on priority need 5, 6, 8. And then move on agreed applicants, those in Band A will be moved into Band B. And if they've not been successful in being offered a property, will be moved into Band A after 12 weeks, which stands at 40. Band D, exclude applicants who deliberately worsen housing situation for 12 months before reapplication, stands at 11. And then the after consultation and next steps, the 6 weeks consultation was completed on the 22nd of February 2026 with 539 responses, of which 423 were fully completed and the remainder partially completed, with 53% of the responses stating that the policy will bring a positive change. There is a table, which I'm not going to try and explain to you now. I'm amazing I've got my tongue around the teeth on all those Band Bs and Cs and As, but there is a table. I'm very happy to take questions. I will need the assistance, Jane, on some of these bandings. But otherwise, I would highly commend this to the Cabinet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, councillor Hastings. It's indeed a detailed piece of work. Councillor Lister, you're first up.
Thank you, Chair. So I completely see why we're trying to do this. 77% increase in applications, 555 new ones every month. But the consultation particularly raises some concerns from residents, particularly things around the misinterpretation of the deliberate worsening clause and clear criteria and appeal routes for these. And can we give residents some assurance that this won't lead to unfair exclusions? Some of the respondents did note that the 60,000 threshold for couples is too high. We're tightening the local connections around this. Can we just give some feedback from those that replied on the consultation as to why we've kept that threshold? There was a note in that conversation as well around frustration and communication and delays. We're increasing the assessment target from 33 to 42 days. Obviously, a lot of these are vulnerable families on the waiting list or trying to get onto the waiting list. How does this align with our strengthening in customer experience rather than just how it can be perceived to be moving the goalposts as opposed to what we're trying to achieve, the perception as opposed to actuality? And housing debt. The consultation asked around flexibility for vulnerable circumstances. So we've got a rigid £1,000 limit and it requires a 12-week payment plan. Some people are maybe in acute crisis, so there may be a challenge in paying that back within that timeline. We have to be careful that we're not creating a double penalty around that. We're trapping financially squeezed households, and then within that payment limit at the same time. The other thing is around our rural areas. We did talk about a 5-mile safety radius on our housing allocations for those fleeing abuse. And are we comfortable that 5 miles is enough? Bear in mind, given some of our areas, specifically with abuse, that's within villages can be quite close and within the same circle to people. So it's just one to bear in mind. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lister. Councillor Keeble.
Thank you very much. I've got quite a few points in just in the order in which they come through the paper. Understand why you're doing the auto bids, but actually it looks like it's back to the old allocation system, which choice-based letting was a big escape from that. So I just urge caution on that. Point 11 in the grid about the domestic violence office, it's a point that Councillor Lister picked up. I would actually think that it would be quite sensible to look separately at the whole issue of allocations for people fleeing domestic violence, because there's issues about the distance, there's issues about if you then find there's a family member nearby, it's really complicated doing assessments of housing allocations for people affected by domestic violence. And I would urge you, in the light of your previous paper, to take that out and deal with it separately. On page 133, where you have about the local connections and people having lived in Northampton in West Northampton for a certain period of time, and then it specifically mentions institutions, hospitals or custody. And I am aware we've got the big issue around St Andrews. We need to make sure two things. One is that this could be interpreted to mean that people coming out of St Andrews who may want to stay in Northampton, because it would be their choice, may be entitled to go on the housing list, and that would have big implications. And the second thing is that if some of the people who come from Northampton, who are then moved out in the current changes that are going on around St Andrews, will they lose their ability then to come back to Northampton after they're discharged, if that's what they want to do? It's a really complex issue, and it needs to be dealt with carefully because of the vulnerability of those people and the need for them to have secure lives. On 61D on page 134 about care leavers and domestic violence survivors, and I brought this up twice before, once at the workshop and once actually here at a previous cabinet meeting. Care leavers are exempted from the local connection but then put in Band D, which means they can join the list but they've got no chance of getting anywhere because Band D is too low priority. And although you don't say on page 135, I think it is, or 134, that the same applies to domestic violence victims, if you read across then to page 151, 151 or is it 153? It's exactly the same thing for domestic violence victims. So if they come from elsewhere, you know, in these changes that go on, they can be exempted from the local connections, but they're put in Band D. So, you know, they can join the list, but they're never going to get anywhere. And frankly, I think that's cruel. It's not making their lives better. It's giving them hope when there is none. There's just two other points. Excuse me, Chair. One is severe overcrowding. The 2 additional bedrooms. That's a gross level of overcrowding. The second thing, which would be great if you could take on board, is have a serious look at the spatial needs of families with children affected by SEND, because you can go into a house and see a child with autism walking up and down the sitting room. That means no one else in the family can use it. And you have 2 children sharing a bedroom when one's got severe autism and the other child just can't get any sleep all night. You know, there are real practical issues about that, and the safety of kids. I've seen them where they run out of a house and there's no fence around the front. And if the child has got behavioural issues, they can run out on the road. There's some real issues that need thinking about there about housing allocations. And finally, on page 153, you've got exclusions from tenancies. And the thing that keeps on coming up from people in my ward is that they really object to the level of substance misuse, in particular cannabis. And can this be taken, specifically mentioned as a serious breach of tenancy? Because this is something that they really object. You know, if you can't expose children to passive tobacco smoke, then you shouldn't be exposing them to passive inhaling of any other kind of smoke. And obviously cannabis fumes are dangerous. And can you please set out the review or appeal process so that we can advise people if they're not happy about their allocations or the process, exactly what their rights of appeal are? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. You will have Councillor Ware down last.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
This policy could be interpreted as a method to reduce demand and therefore make success more likely. We're reporting a 77% increase in demand since 24, and whilst it all seems well and good to shrink the list, we can see that demand is not shrinking. We learned that the proposal is to increase the assessment period from 33 to 42 days, putting additional pressure on our residents at a time of great stress for them. Another example of making a process more efficient and targets more achievable, but not putting our residents first. Therefore, my first question, what update do we have about what we're doing upstream to increase our housing stock? What are we doing to prevent homelessness? Given the Q3 KPIs reported, this seems to be an area where we are consistently and woefully poor. Auto bids are noted as dependent on the procurement of the housing allocation system. Where are we at with the procurement of this system, please? In section 8 of the summarised changes, where references to rough sleepers who don't wish to make an application, we assume that this does not exclude public sector duty under the Care Act 2020-14 or Homelessness Reduction Act 2017. I think that's what Councillor Hastie has said in his introduction, and I will welcome that that's confirmation that that is the case. Section 8 on page 137 defines preferences for armed forces personnel. My question is, how will this policy allow for nuances in definition? For example, how are special forces or secret service personnel handled, where protection may be in place that makes compliance with the policy impossible? That might seem like a very small segment to be concerned about, but we do have some casework where that actually is quite an issue. Similarly, in addition to these examples, when and how will judgment apply for domestic violence victims and care leavers? We must avoid the computer say no inflexibility that will allow for people to fall through the system simply because they don't tick all the boxes. My final question builds on what Councillor Lister raised and is linked to the proposed 5-mile radius from the location of the crime for victims of domestic abuse. I also concur with Councillor Keeble to ensure that this must have special focus. Whilst I appreciate some people may wish to stay fairly local, for schools access, for example, it is my view that a 5-mile radius is insufficient. So my question is, what have you done to consult with domestic abuse charities, women's groups, and people with lived experience to determine an appropriate radius? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ware. Some councillors from Cabinet to speak. Councillor Coos, I'm aware of anybody else coming after Councillor Coos. Then back to Councillor Hasty.
Thank you, Chair. What matters most to me is that this policy clearly prioritises people with the greatest need, including those with complex health issues, disabilities, mental ill health, and those experiencing domestic abuse or homelessness. We know safe, settled housing is fundamental to good health and well-being. When people are living in unsuitable or unstable accommodation, we see rising pressure on social care, safeguarding, mental health services, and the NHS. It has been estimated that in England, poor housing costs the NHS around £1.5 billion a year through illnesses we could prevent. That is why allocating suitable, stable homes to people with health needs isn't just the right thing to do. It directly reduces long-term system pressure. This revised policy strengthens medical and welfare assessments, improves consistency and transparency, and helps to ensure scarce housing is used where it makes the biggest difference. My key ask going forward is that housing, adult social care, and public health continue working closely together, especially where people need support to sustain tenancies or where reasonable adjustments are needed. Unstable housing isn't just a social issue, it's also a health one. An academic study published last year estimated that people who are homeless are admitted to hospital 2.5 times more often than the general population. And for rough sleepers, that jumps to around 10 times. Stable housing is one of the most effective prevention tools we have to reduce avoidable demand on our services and on the NHS. Overall, this is a balanced and evidence-led update that supports prevention, protects the most vulnerable, and aligns strongly with our health and well-being priorities. I therefore strongly support the review of this housing allocations policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coos. Councillor Hasty and Jane, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Coos, for your words of support. Thank you to the councillors who've almost made me run out of ink. So, Councillor Lister first. The consultation does raise concern about deliberately worsening it. I would like to explore that with you further. I think that is, I don't think anyone here would deliberately worsen the situation to improve figures. I don't believe that's the case of anyone of here. So I think it may be interpreted like that, but it's not the intention. Fudging the numbers or trying to improve it, I'm sure you'd agree, is not really what we're about. The £60,000 couples limit, we're kind of constrained by basically what we can put it at. I think that is a high number. To me, intuitively, it feels like a high number, but I'll ask Jane to explain that. To me personally, it just seems a lot. The housing debt, £1,000 12-week plan, and that is, I think there is a challenge with that. I think it's very difficult to try and set hard numbers on rules when we're dealing with people, and I think often the times that we should try and have hard, fast rules, and it doesn't give you the flexibility to have any discretion, and I think that's a risk we work very hard, and I'm sure you guys would work very hard to do, to try and build that discretion is, but when does that discretion stop? And that's when you have to bring it back to hard and fast rules. So we are very keen to try and not have, I'm afraid it's 1001 and you can't repay it for 14 weeks. That would be ludicrous. But at the same time, there still has to be rules. Rural areas, the 5-mile safety radius, I don't actually even think, I think possibly, I personally would like to see this explored, because I think the council, all the councillors have said that it's in the rural areas that's not enough, but it may be that that's not enough even in Northampton itself. 5 miles, certainly in my ward, could put you 2 villages over, but it would still be well known where you are to other people in those wards, but some of the villages are small. I'd like to try and take that away and have a think about what I can do with officers to see if we can have some flexibility on that. Again, maybe there's some room for discretion and not being a hard and fast rule, but I would need to defer to officers on that. The auto bid choice-based and the systems relation, I'll ask Jane to cover that. The St Andrews, I have to be honest with you, it does worry me. I don't have the answer. I don't think this is the case, but both the flip side of them being, if they're here, do they become WNC's responsibility? More importantly, what happens if they're WNC and then they move away to another hospital? Do they then lose the right to come back? I just, right here, right now, I don't have the answer. That I will do my very best to come back with something hard on that. I would agree that care leave is about Band D and also domestic violence and anyone like that. It is, the intention isn't to be cruel, but if you're going to put someone in a situation personally, again, where you're kind of saying like, well done, you're on Band D, but you'll be 13 years, you'll be years before you get there. It's part of the policy of also making it a faster allocation process as much as we can. And that comes on to the idea of where's the upstream for the housing, as Councillor Ware was putting it, and then also detecting homelessness. And I think the work to be done on detecting homelessness really is one of the critical pathways because of the associated costs. As they say, cost of acquisition of a customer is far higher than cost of retention. The cost of dealing with homelessness before someone gets homeless is massively cheaper than it is once they are. And we've got moves to bring in, for instance, the system of Zantura. I think you may have heard me talk about that before. So it's a AI-based multi-directorate approach and outside in terms of Revs and Bens, HMRC, in terms of people being short on council tax, looking for the telltale signs that there may be a trend that's going to drive them into homelessness. So again, very much looking to prevent homelessness. I do agree with you, again, coming back to the judgment where the computer says no. Again, I'd like to think that we have some flexibility. It shouldn't just be about the computer says no. But then again, when does that creep start coming into? Then you've let that one through, and then what happens when it's just that slight creep that means you're drifting away from your policies? Jane, do you want to step in and help with anything? Thank you very much.
So I'm just going to make sure I pick up. I've written down a load of questions, so I just want to make sure I've got them all. Sorry, 1 second. There was a lot of questions. Sorry. Okay, so just starting with the question around debt and the £1,000, we have to have a level which we start at. Obviously, we try to stay in line with other local areas so that we don't end up out of kilter. However, there is other help available at different points with people who have debt that is prohibitive for them getting other tenancies or there's extenuating circumstances. So we would look across all the areas, including our Revs and Bens colleagues and various other areas, and also hardship funds and the crisis resilience funds and various elements when we're working with somebody who's got a particularly difficult case where debt has built up. Sorry, I'm just going through. With regards to 60,000 for couples, that basically is a best practice figure that's given across the country. But when we worked it through in terms of affordability for our area, we've set those salary bandings based on what is affordable to people in each of those categories. So the couples, the single parent and the single person is based on affordability for our area when we've assessed it. Sorry, just making sure I get all of them. We always apply discretion with regards to domestic abuse, but obviously we can't allow our register to be oversubscribed. So this is absolutely not about reducing numbers. It is about making sure that we are dealing with people on a need base, not a want base. So at the moment, the register is obviously completely open for applications and you do get high numbers. But if we have limited housing stock, but we also work with people on other things such as private rented sector and all of those other areas as well to try and give as much support as possible. But we do have limitations on stock. Councillor Ware, you asked a question on what our forward plan is. Our acquisitions programme that we started a few years ago is actually built up quite substantially in terms of the numbers that we're acquiring. And you would have seen papers come through cabinets about now we're working with some developers about buying blocks of units to increase that. In addition, there's a pipeline being built that I think is due into one of the scrutinies. Actually, I think it's already been into one, but it's going into another one of the scrutinies to review that pipeline as well. But there is a pipeline that we can share with members that shows you the kind of trajectory. Clearly, there was a lull in the pipeline when we took the development back from Northamptonshire Partnership Homes, but starting from 2027, we should see some of those numbers start to come through in terms of those. In terms of the area delivery of affordable housing, we had a massive increase in this year with 453 last year to 620 in this year, just gone, financial year just gone. So we are seeing an increase from things like the delivery board and working through those. Just with regards to the Band D comment, that is for obviously out of area people. Again, that is in line with all of the other local areas. If we came out of line with all of the other local areas, the likelihood is our register will be overloaded from people out of areas. So we need to make sure that we are always balancing our need with surrounding areas to make sure that we're not putting ourselves in a position where we've got needs that we can't manage again. And just with regards to drug-related, no, it's not in the tenancy at the moment, but something like cannabis would be virtually impossible for a court to enforce eviction. So we've got to be realistic about what we put in a policy in order to do that.
There's just
One sec, Jane, if you finish summing up.
Second.
I think Jane's got a bit
Sorry,
more.
yeah, just one more thing in terms of the focus sessions. When we did consultation, we did policy was wide consultation, so it was available to anybody to respond to, but we also did sessions with members who could input. We did sessions with scrutiny, and we also did sessions with our local housing partners as well. So all of those had a chance to input to all of this as we've been around. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, may I just step back in?
Of course.
Questions. I think I'm going to ask you because I've noticed the overcrowding and the SEND, autism and things like that in terms of how we deal with overcrowding where there are SEND children and autistic, and basically if they're making life very difficult for other children in the house, the question of just behavioural patterns, you'll be able to answer that far more eloquent than I will. And the other one I was coming back to was Councillor Ware mentioned about the rough sleepers, Section 8, and also on page 137, the armed forces personnel, especially including special forces, and was it the Secret Service or something like SBO, sneaky biggies, basically. Yeah. Can you help with that? Or could we get that in writing?
I think I'm going to come back. I'm going to look back on those questions because I've come back from where we were. Certainly we have priority needs in our own area, but I think you might be asking a question about out of area. So I just need to understand your question fully. So if you could email it through to me. With regards to the SEND element and how that's assessed in terms of the housing, I need to check with my officers in terms of how we apply legislation. So I don't want to answer that incorrectly. So again, those two questions I'll pick up outside of this and give you responses from there.
Councillor Keeble.
Yeah, it's just brief. On the spatial issues, I mean, when you get back to me, can you just expand on the 2 additional bedrooms point? Because the overcrowding standards are appalling nationally. It's something that they need to look at nationally really seriously. But there's a particular issue around SEND, so I'll be really, because we were going to look at it as a group, so I'd be really grateful if you could come back in detail on that. And just about the point about the substance misuse, my understanding of this section of the allocations wasn't so much about eviction, although I take the point that there's an issue around that, but it's about excluding them from going back onto the list, which may be a lower level of proof required. You're not looking for a prosecution, you're looking to keep them going back into accommodation. And it might be possible to do that. I'd be grateful if you could just look at it, because this issue about drug abuse, substance misuse in some areas is a major issue for families who really object to their children being exposed to the fumes.
Yeah, understand. I mean, again, I need to take that away. I'm I'm not convinced the legislation would allow for that, but I will check it with officers what options are. Clearly, we work with anybody who's in our existing housing around antisocial behaviour. I'm not sure of the grounds on which you could exclude somebody from the register for that, so I would need to check. I'll come back to you.
Councillor Hasty, do you have anything else to add? We there?
No, only to I thank the councillors for their questions, because it's clearly they know it, they've looked into it, and they've come up with the salient points. We'll always try to try and find answers. But anyway, I thank everybody, especially the officers, for this, because it's hard enough just to say, let alone to actually build a system like this in terms of banding. So I want to thank the officers on that, and I just commend it to the Cabinet for approval, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hasty. If we're at that point and there's nothing further to add, a proposer from the floor, please. Councillor Manning, seconded by Councillor Slope, and a vote with a show of hands. And that's unanimous. Thank you. We're on to item number 12 of tonight's agenda, the adoption of contaminated land strategy, cost recovery and hardship policy. And that one is presented by Councillor Last.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of the report, this item seeks Cabinet approval to adopt a new West Northamptonshire contaminated land strategy, together with an accompanying cost recovery and hardship policy. The purpose is threefold. One, to discharge the Council's statutory duties under Part 2A of the Environmental Protection Act 1990. Two, to replace outdated, inconsistent legacy policies inherited from the former districts. And three, introduce a clear, transparent and proportionate framework for managing contaminated land risk across West Northamptonshire. Why this matters: local authorities are legally required to A, inspect the area for contaminated land, B, identify land that presents a significant risk to human health or the environment, and C, sets out how those risks will be assessed, managed, and where necessary, remediated. West Northamptonshire Council did not previously have a single unified strategy covering the whole authority. This report corrects that position and ensures that legal compliance, consistency of approach, and clear governance and accountability. What it does do is set out a risk-based proportionate inspection regime, prioritise action only where credible risks are identified, align council practice with national statutory guidance, and support regeneration and brownfield development in a controlled, evidence-led way. Cost recovery and hardship policy. Alongside the strategy, Cabinet is asked to adopt a cost recovery and hardship policy as required by government guidance. The key principles are as follows. First and foremost, the polluter pays principle remains central. The Council may recover remediation costs where legally appropriate. Each case will be considered individually, and the policy explicitly allows for financial hardship, vulnerability considerations, proportionality, and fairness. This provides reassurance that enforcement will be reasonable, transparent, and humane, not punitive. Consultation and stakeholder engagement. The draft strategy and policy were subject to public consultation between December 2025 and January 2026. Responses informed refinement of the final documents. Importantly, feedback led to the inclusion of a public register, improving transparency and public confidence. Financial and resource implications. No immediate financial impact arising from adoption. No commitment to routine or protective or proactive site investigations. Remediation activity would be risk-led, funded externally wherever possible, cost recovered where the law permits. This is a prudently framed strategy and not an unfunded liability. Environmental, community and regeneration benefit. Protects the public health and the environment, provides a clear framework for developers and landowners, supports responsible brownfield redevelopment and reduces uncertainty and legal risk for the Council. The strategy replaces multiple historic policies with single West Northamptonshire framework, enables updates under regulated delegated authority in consultation with the portfolio holder, establish clarity on roles, thresholds and decision making. This ensures Cabinet retains strategic oversight without unnecessary operational escalation. Recommendations to Cabinet. Cabinet is asked to 1. Approve the adoption of the West Northamptonshire Contaminated Land Strategy. 2. Approve the cost recovery and hardship policy. And 3. Authorise the Corporate Director for Law and Governance in consultation with the portfolio holder to make future updates where required to remain compliant with legislation and guidance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Last. 2 speakers to this item. Councillor Lister first.
Thank you, Chair. So the policy is making a choice not to engage in proactive investigation of contaminated sites while funding is restricted. So we're relying on a reactive model, which is triggered only by complaints or planning applications. Given our industrial heritage, do we not think that's a massive gamble? So a few questions here. Policy defines hardship with a dictionary term of hardness of fatal circumstance. Since remediation costs can be very expensive, isn't such a loose subjective definition a legal risk? And why haven't we established a clear financial criteria for waiving these costs to protect the taxpayer? If a serious contamination issue is found after a polluter has disappeared and then it becomes an orphan site, the council is legally stuck with the full bill. By choosing that reactive model that we discussed, are we just not creating an unquantified financial black hole for a later problem? And the other issue, we've got zero entry public register. Does it really reflect that we've just got no pollution anywhere, or are we just not looking for the problems? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lister. I'm sure we'll finish you with a reply very shortly. Councillor Holland-Delamere, you've been waiting patiently all evening for this moment. Over to you.
So I echo some of the comments of Daniel Lister. I think it's around transparency because, like, we've listened to the advice, to the consultation, to have a public register, and then there's no entries on it. And if we know anything of elsewhere in the country where there's ongoing issues, which we can't go into to the north, basically about contaminated land and transparency. And I note that, of course, historic records and rejected cases are not listed as well. I think in terms of our need for candour and lessons learned from elsewhere, so bearing in mind an audit and governance presentation that one of the legal officers gave to us about the duty to candour, and another case that we had under the last term about some land that we sold off and weren't sure about whether it had been sorted out or not. We really do need to make sure that somewhere we do list historic sites where we know that we've had remediation work carried out in the interest of public transparency, because sometimes you end up with conspiracy theories about has it or has it not been done. And sometimes, of course, you might have someone come to you and say, we want to raise a complaint about this site, and then we go, oh no, there's no issues for it. Well, the public and the conspiracy theorists will go, well, what did you do about it then? Because if we say, oh, there's no issue, we'll just ignore this. So I think there's really a need for us to be transparent about the historic sites, and like we know that we've also got closed, tips in our area, and we know that the environmental issues from them are quite high in terms of we can't really remediation. Okay, so we end up with seepages here, etc. And we're not actively looking for anything, etc. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, we've got new development. And I know, of course, the report talks about, building control and that type of stuff where with the development plan, we'll look into it. But we just need to be aware that there will be a lot of questions out there about what we're trying to hide. But actually, we need to be transparent. We have looked into it. There was no problems here. We can put there as reports, historic reports, in the public domain. And so, yes, we've considered it. We're not just saying there's nothing to see here. We've actually said, okay, this is what we found and this is what we... So we've got a public register under this and there's nothing on it. We need to be cognizant of the fact that we need to be open with people about what we do know and the duty of candour.
Thank you, Councillor Holland-Delamere. Any questions from the floor? And I will refer back to Councillor Last, and we have Sarah all here, whose area this covers. I'm sure you'll refer to if need be. Councillor Last.
Thank you for the offer, Chair. I think I can manage some of those questions. So first of all, just because we say that there's no proactive activity looking for contaminated land. I mean, you know, the size of this county, we couldn't possibly test every square inch of the county. That would be unrealistic. I did say that we are testing on a risk-led basis. So obviously we have intelligence, we have history books, we know where contaminated land was in the past, and we are proactively looking at that land. I think also we need to mention the fact that even though we are, you know, the contaminator is the first primary person responsible for clearing up the mess, if you want to put it in an appropriate way. That doesn't necessarily, if the contaminator has moved on from that land or that property, sold it to somebody else, it doesn't necessarily mean that the taxpayer has to pay for the cleanup of that land. The duty there usually falls on the landowner. So we try and go for the polluter first, then the landowner, and then if we can't through legal mechanisms and make sure that contaminated land is not recoverable by the people who own it or the contaminator itself, then we're legally obligated to clear up the mess. So we want to try and reduce that risk to our taxpayers as much as possible. And that's why the approach is set out in the way it is. You've got to accept, and one of the points that I raised during this paper and the consultation on the paper was that you might have an individual, for example, that wasn't a polluter, but they bought the land in the knowledge that it was cheap and it was contaminated, and they don't have the means to, to recover that resource. So then it falls on our taxpayer, and then the value of the land goes up, and then all of a sudden the person, benefits from that activity and that sale. We want to protect our taxpayers from that sort of activity, and I think we'd be naive if we didn't appreciate that that could happen. So, yeah. Yeah, was there any other question in particular? Is it satisfied?
I think you may have done. Sarah, do you have anything to add from your perspective?
Councillor Last is correct. He did very eloquently address all the points. The only thing I was going to add was actually it would be remiss of me not to say that the volume of the kind of hardship queries that we get is actually incredibly low. So the risk in terms of, the cost associated with it is incredibly low. And Councillor Last is absolutely correct. He did challenge us through the drafting of this report to the points that have been made by other members this evening in the room. And the report is written taking into account our statutory responsibilities and the guidance that there is. So we do have to have this report, we do have to have this policy, we do have to have the hardship policy, etc., in order to be legally compliant with those rules and those regulations, etc. So, but as I say, it is very, very low risk in terms of the volumes that we get through in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. If we're all done on that item, it looks like we are. We'll take a proposer from the floor. Councillor Stansfield, seconded Councillor Hastie, and a vote with a show of hands, if we can, please. Yep. All done and dusted. And then to the last item on tonight's agenda, which is the asset management plan presented this evening by Councillor Slope, the assistant, I believe, of Simon Bowers, who sat patiently waiting at the end of the table as well for input later. Councillor Slope.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just about to introduce Simon on that previous matter with our newfangled asset management system, whether it could record contaminated land and show an audit trail, but I won't do that to you, Simon. Certainly not in public. Anyway, thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to present the Property Asset Management Plan for 2025 to 2030 for Cabinet's approval. This plan sits beneath the estate strategy that Cabinet approved in mid-25, when the strategy set out what we want to achieve with our land and buildings. The AMP sets out how we will deliver it, who is responsible, when, at what cost, and with what expected outcomes. First, the context. The council owns and manages around 1,000 properties, inherited from 4 predecessor councils alongside assets acquired or built since 2021. That portfolio is the physical platform for service delivery. One Angel Square, the Forum in Toasters, schools, care homes, libraries, family hubs, leisure centres and depots. Without these buildings, we cannot deliver the services. Take that. But let me be straight with colleagues. This estate is also in a significant financial exposure. We carry an estimated 14 million maintenance backlog against a planned budget of 1.4 million a year. That is roughly a decade of catch-up at the current rate. Compliance pressures, utility costs and service demand are all rising. Doing nothing is not a neutral option, it's an accumulating liability. The AMP addresses this through 5 priorities: a fit-for-purpose estate, a well-managed and maintained estate, collaboration with partners, optimising revenue generation, and empowering growth. Each priority carries a concrete action programme with timescales, named leads, and indicative costs. A few highlights for colleagues. Completing the office optimisation programme across One Angel Square, Daventry and Toaster, reducing footprint and running costs. Stock condition surveys across the whole of the estate by 2027 at a cost of £453,000. For the first time, we'll have a credible 15-year maintenance plan rather than reacting to breakdowns. A structured disposal programme to release capital receipts from surplus and underperforming assets. Active rent reviews across the commercial estate targeting 3 to 5% uplifts. Rollouts of the CAFM system, previously referred to give us a single digital asset register, a baseline we've never had across the whole portfolio. On governance, day-to-day delivery sits with the Director of Place Economy and Environment and the Assistant Director of Assets and Environment. The corporate landlord body and the Property Assets and Capital Board provide strategic oversight. Cabinet retains the decisions on major acquisitions, disposals, and the annual refresh of this plan. I want to thank James Aldridge, Lauren Wright, and the property strategy team for producing a plan that is evidence-based and honest about the scale of the challenge. Chair, I commend the recommendation to Cabinet to approve the asset management plan as appended. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Slope. 2 speakers, 3 speakers. Councillor Lister.
Thank you very much. So our top goal, priority for optimising revenue, which includes marketing our estate to investors. So we're spending 130,000 to review our heritage assets. If the corporate landlord model finds that a historic building has a high maintenance bill and a negative financial return, does the plan have any red lines in it for heritage, or will the revenue priority 4 always win over the history aspect of our assets? Also, the plan talks about projects not having confirmed budgets and will be phased. With half of our £40 million backlog unaddressed in the current action plan, are we deferring essential repairs on the buildings we intend to keep? And is that liability growing every month whilst we wait? And also, as we optimise our offices, what guarantees are in place that our rural residents particularly won't see a decline in service accessibility or left with any buildings that have hidden repair liabilities? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lister. Councillor Holland Delamere.
I mean, having been around now for 5 years, I can see the progress that has been made in asset management, but I also recognise the amount of challenges still to tackle with the team. One of the things, I do welcome the fact that rent reviews will be more frequent, because I know a lot of community organisations have been caught out by a 50% rise in 1 year, and I think one intervention that sort of slowed that down, because a 50% rise in 1 year is pretty significant. So 3 and 5% rise is much more manageable for organisations. I think for me, it's mainly about learning lessons about how we've handled our assets before, because we've had situations where we've had assets, we've sold them off, then end up buying them back. So we need to be make sure that we're very clear about that we've really taken into account all the different strategies as part of our review of assets. I note, for example, that in some of the areas like with one of the priorities with children's homes, we had commitment from under the last administration and the last council of 20 million. We're still a long way off delivering on those priorities for our organisation in terms of lowering our overall costs and maximising the usage of our assets. And my chief concern is around, are we realistic about our delivery? Are we resourced enough within the teams to actually handle this? Because I am conscious of a number of times where things have dragged on for years, and by years I mean 6-7 years, and for organisations that have been waiting and negotiating with us, it's taken so long for us to actually come to a decision. So for me, there's good progress. I recognise how much work the teams had to do, and that they had challenges with the old districts in terms of how they handled the asset management, bring them all together. They've done a fantastic job. So well done to the team for what they've done so far. But have we learnt the lessons of all our predecessor authorities? And are we making sure that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past? And historic assets is one of the things that Dan Lister mentioned. I think we need to be cognizant of that actually the public will go, okay, why are we sending off that when actually it's clear to everyone that there's already a sort of an idea that actually no one's listening to, and we need to go, okay, we need to pause this, because actually we really need to think this through properly and get rid of. If we do quick sales, we might be shooting ourselves in the foot down the line.
Thank you, Councillor Delamere. Any members from Cabinet wish to speak to this? I did, but Councillor House, I'm very sorry. You're correct.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll try and be brief. From my perspective, again, just to echo some of the points, yes, we're seeing some progress on this, but this follows on from the original strategy, which I can't remember exactly when it was presented, but it's certainly over 12 months ago. So there's been quite a gap between, again, we've talked about this evening earlier, strategy versus plan. It's taken a long time to get the plan. I have to say, for me, I find the plan not very specific and not terribly measurable. All of the targets within it are very broad over the next 4 or 5 years. I personally would like to see those targets tightened down so we know specifically what workload is being undertaken when. Similar point around accountability. It's very functionally orientated. I think it would be better to have, if not personal name, then certainly functional role down on the action plan as to who is actually responsible for which element of it. So for me, it just lacks some specifics, really. There are a couple of specific points I would like to mention or raise. The first of which is, I'm pleased to see that we're still talking about sustainability and climate change in the context of improving energy efficiency and reducing environmental impact. But again, it doesn't really tell us what or how we're going to quantify and measure any of that. Councillor Holland Delamere mentioned the children's homes. There's nothing that mentions them, but there's nothing specific in there in terms of where we're at with that target, what exactly we're aiming for and by when. Youth zone was mentioned earlier. It's in this document, but it's not in our youth strategy, and we've not got any funding for it. So again, there's something for me which is about not joining up the dots necessarily. The document also refers to biogas, MRF, green waste. That's quite a significant site potentially. So I would have thought we should be talking about that in the context of our local plan as well, which goes way beyond this time frame to 2043. So I'm surprised that we're talking about potentially new facilities. It also talks about land for depot expansion for waste. So again, I'm just surprised we're not joining up the dots. I would have thought we should be featuring that in our local plan. If it's just an aspiration, then we should say it's an aspiration rather than have it in a because this is supposed to be the detailed plan. One of my beefs or bugbears for some time has been around the disposal programme, probably similar to Councillor Holland Delamere. It doesn't tell us exactly what we're talking about in terms of asset value. The last time I inquired on this, I think I was told somewhere between 20 and 25 million pounds worth of assets, potentially for disposal. I think, again, for transparency, it'd be useful to see exactly what we're talking about there, because clearly the quicker we can release those assets, if we're not going to keep them, then potentially we create the opportunity to generate additional revenue, which potentially we could use for something else. So that's really the key points. There's one final bit. It talks about the supporting of the West Northants economic strategy. It doesn't say anything specific about that. And some of the key areas that we talk about in the economic strategy: advanced logistics, advanced manufacturing, motorsports, creative and digital, clean energy, life sciences. I can't see how that aligns with the assets that we have in our portfolio. So for me, it sets out a framework, but it needs, for me personally, far more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Apologies again for overlooking you at the beginning. Councillor Slope, anyone from the floor first? Before I defer to Councillor Slope and Simon Bowers. Whoever first.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and thank you for the questions. And if Cabinet members aren't seen to be raising questions here, just mainly for any viewers, there's an EPB that we have, which other members will know about, Executive Programme Board, where these are scrutinised, and there's an awful lot of questions going on. So they're not repeating themselves. They're not just sitting quietly because they're not interested. It's because they've raised lots of questions on all points, not just this particular subject. So taking some of the questions, I'm going to rely on Simon as a certain backup. Just going back to one of the items, the rent increases 3 to 5%. Yeah, we have come across properties, and it's mainly advertised in the press, and we don't defend ourselves that well. We don't bother, but yeah, we haven't defended ourselves that well. Some of these properties haven't had a rent increase in 10 years. Oversight, neglect, I don't know why, but we're now picking up on this, and it's wrong. And it's wrong in both ways, certainly to let it go 10 years. And then suddenly hit someone with a 50, 60, 70% rent increase. It looks awful, but it makes good press. But yes, that's recognised now. We've introduced a better software package to better manage the assets. I would have been, I've had the blowtorch taken to my feet over some of the properties that we've had, that we've neglected, that we've forgotten we've had, and it's cost us a fortune to put right. And I know Simon was deeply concerned over that as well, and he's not trying to avoid it. We do have these discussions, and fairly fiery ones at these EPBs where these come to our attention, and of course no one gets thrown under the bus, but we do take them seriously, and we do accept the comments that come our way. So that's dealing with that side of it. We're going to have another slippage this year on some of the acquisitions that we wanted to make. We were really desperately trying to keep up with the demand, and it's just not happened this year. And you see in the financial reports that will come through that there'll be slippage again, which is really disappointing. It's something we do speak with the directors and the officers about, and it's not good. We're trying to rectify that. We're trying to buy, as you would have heard, properties in bulk. We're trying to get the best value, and you'll see more coming online. But it does take a bit longer than we probably first imagined when we first came into office that it would take. And hands up, it's taking longer, but we are on the case on those. The phased budgets, yeah, we would have, as I said, would cost about 14 million. We've got 1.4 million. If we had more money set aside, I'm sure we would do more with it. But as I said, with this software, we will be able to hopefully prioritise. Simon will confirm that, but we'll be better able to prioritise which properties certainly need to be sold, what the values are, and we'll be able to hopefully come back to you with a better valuation of our assets, because it has been not a finger in the air, but it's not as been as scientific as we hoped it will be moving forward. Let me just take some of these more before I hand them over to Simon. As for the broad targets, yeah, it is a new plan that we've put in place. It's not quite the finished article as we'll accept, but it's something to build upon, and it's a work in progress. But it is a direction of travel that we want. We want to be more efficient. We want to have targets. The efficiencies that have been mentioned, yes, they're certainly considered, and again, it's recorded in the asset management software. With regard to the local plan, how tied this is into that and at what stage, I'm going to have to leave that to Simon with his knowledge on that, with his detailed knowledge. But I've answered some of the questions. I know Simon's has been busily taking notes as well, and if there's any questions after that, then please remind me, and then we'll try and deal with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Slope. Over to Simon.
If we can get some IT that works, that will start. Okay, I'll work through the list in some kind of order, if I may. So, first things first, historic assets, no revenue doesn't trump all. This council clearly values its historic estate, and it isn't a question of just saying, well, we'll flog it because it's not generating a financial return. But we do need to understand the financial position of those assets. Obviously, there's a classic one we're working through at the moment, which is the County Hall site. Very important historic estate, mixture of grade 1 down to grade 2. We're not in any means just going to sort of close that and get rid of it. Indeed, we've invested in it, but we are looking at options that will bring those buildings into sensible use, which helps us financially, but also secures a future for them. Are we deferring liabilities of buildings? In some cases, yes, but we are making progress, as Councillor Holland-Delamere recognised. We inherited an estate that was in a pretty poor state. It varied across the 4 predecessor councils, but there was some really shocking examples of lack of maintenance. We are gradually working through that. The 1.4 million isn't the only budget we apply. There are specific project budgets that are approved as well. A simple one, we've recently completed work on restoring the roof of the Royal and Ern Gate. That had to be done. It was probably never been maintained effectively since the building was constructed in the 1980s. Now, that was a freestanding budget. So it didn't sit within that 1.4. So there are things like that going on. Equally, there are buildings we dispose of, and we don't want to spend money maintaining those in most cases. It's better to get shot. Will rural residents lose out? No, that's not the intention. The council has a clear customer access strategy, which includes things like family hubs, that includes our main offices in Daventry and Towcester, as well as Northampton. That isn't going to change. This strategy actually supports delivering that customer access approach. One point I want to clarify, that the point about 3.5 3 or 5% rise in rents. That's the rent roll as a whole. It's not specific properties. Specific properties inevitably will have higher increases. The example that Councillor Slope mentioned, I will actually defend it because that was a 10-year lease. The rent review was due at year 5. That was during the middle of the pandemic. It was impossible to carry out a rent review at that point because there was no evidence. So the rent stayed the same. 10 years later, inevitably the market has moved on. And so that was the result. Now, I appreciate the kind of practical difficulties, but that was a proper commercial arrangement that the council was working to. Nothing difficult with that at all, really. Councillor Holland-Delamere noted we've sold assets in the past. I think probably our predecessors, and we bought them back. I can think of 2, a set of former public toilets and a tram or bus depot. I think both sold in very different circumstances, to be fair to my predecessors, and purchased for different purposes. And equally, if we hung on to them for 10 years, there would have been a lot of holding costs. So it's not simply a bad thing necessarily that those assets weren't in our ownership throughout. There is a bit of a tension, and this has been sort of picked up by members, between wanting to act quickly, and we do want to act quickly, and taking all factors into consideration and making sure we haven't made a mistake, for example, selling something and then regretting it. And that tension is just natural to an organisation like this. We have lots of different things we are trying to do at any one time. You've been discussing them this evening. And inevitably, we have to make sure, in a rounded way, that we've taken those on board before taking decisions. So sometimes that does take longer than certainly personally I would like, but it's necessary to make sure the organisation's needs are met. This is a strategy. It's not a detailed plan, which perhaps picks up on Councillor Harris's point. We could produce hundreds of lines of specifics. I don't think that would be very useful to Cabinet, and it would inevitably change in any event. So yes, it will evolve, as Councillor Slope has said. It probably will get a little bit more detailed. But here, you're setting us direction to go and deliver, not the fine detail. In terms of the very specific issues about biogas and so on, the development of the Westbridge depot, that's already in a number of the council strategies, including the waste and resources strategy and the estate climate strategy. And the development of the Westbridge site for waste purposes makes a huge amount of sense. It's an existing waste site. It's very difficult to create new waste sites. And we also have a rather large petroleum storage facility next door, which makes it virtually impossible to do anything else there because of the risks of that going up in smoke at some point. So I think it's consistent with the local plan for sure, but fundamentally there isn't much else you could do with it anyway. So it just makes sense that you follow that through. And we're working obviously with our waste colleagues on that. Disposal programme, that evolves over time. Sometimes quite large opportunities come up and clearly we take them. Happy to talk further about that on another occasion. In terms of the economic strategy and supporting it with the AMP, it was Councillor Harris, wasn't it? Yes, you're right. We probably can't do much for sort of advanced aerospace in this strategy, although you never know. But what we can do is seek to reshape our commercial estate in ways that then support the local economy. And the key way we're likely to do that is providing smaller industrial units. There is a really big economic pressure. If you're a developer, you want to build big sheds because they generate a higher return. That doesn't actually suit all of our local economic base. We need smaller premises. And the council, of course, needs income. So you can see there's a connection there. We dispose of parts of the estate that aren't fit for purpose, things like the estate shops. We put money back into things which enable the council to generate an income, but also enable local economic activity, some of which might be occupied by some of those high-end occupiers that were discussed. Just to say, our valuations, I think it may have been a sort of cross wire. All our valuations each year we do for the council estate are audited. The auditors are happy with us. There's no issues there. The accounts are signed off each year without valuations being a problem. And finally, in terms of the local plan, yeah, we're very much aware of the local plan. It obviously affects what we do with parts of the estate. The classic one being there's a housing allocation or a proposed housing allocation for land north of Buckton Fields, which we know is Rectory Farm. That will be a massive project for us to take forward to make sure the council gets the best out of that land, not just in terms of money, but also in terms of all the other outputs the council is looking for. So I think I've covered everything. Apologies, that was a bit of a run through, but happy to take any further questions. Thank you. That's a very fair question. It has at times been a struggle to get the staff we need. In fact, even now, our maintenance team is not at the staffing I would like and is provided for in the establishment. So we're working through that process. If we necessarily apply market factor supplements, and if that doesn't work, we will have to outsource blocks. Well, we do outsource blocks of work, but we'll have to do that further, because if we cannot get the people, then we need to get the resource another way.
Thank you, Simon. That was very detailed.
Chair, if I may, Simon is on my list for many catch-up points, so I'll follow up on you on a few of those if I may. Thank you.
No problem at all, Councillor Harris. Any Cabinet, anything else to add? Super. We'll conclude then with a vote. A proposer from the floor. Councillor Butler, seconded Councillor Coos, and a vote with a show of hands, please. That's unanimous. And with no further items on the agenda, no urgent business, we'll bring the meeting to a close. The time is 21:38. A date of the next meeting, I might defer to Paul Hanson, because it's not on my briefing note. Would you remind me for public before you cut the feed? The 6th of June, 6 p.m, this chamber. Thank you, members. Thank you, members of the public. Good night.